Welcome back, moonlit souls. Tonight, I'm taking you somewhere dangerous, somewhere intoxicating, somewhere you won't want to leave. Picture this, a woman who's lost everything. A werewolf alpha who's about to lose more. One rain-soaked collision that will ignite a war, spark a revolution, and set two hearts ablaze in ways neither saw coming. This is a tale of shattered glass and broken promises, of ancient power meeting unstoppable will, of a love so fierce it will rewrite the laws that govern the supernatural world itself. Before we descend into this storm of passion and peril, do me a favor, hit that like button, share this story with your pack, and subscribe so you never miss a tale told under the moon's watchful gaze. Now then, let me tell you about the night Scarlett Thorne accidentally kidnapped the most dangerous man on the Emerald Coast, and how that single moment of chaos would save them both. Chapter 1. Collision of Fates. The rain had been falling for 72 hours straight. Not the gentle mist that the Emerald Coast was famous for, but torrential sheets of water that turned streets into rivers and made the city's neon signs blur into abstract paintings of light and shadow. It was the kind of rain that felt apocalyptic, like the sky itself was weeping for all the broken dreams drowning in the streets below. Scarlett Thorne stood in the doorway of Crimson Brew, staring at the eviction notice taped to the glass like it was a death sentence. Because in every way that mattered, it was 24 hours. That's all she had left. Her hands trembled as she read the words again, though she'd already memorized every brutal syllable. The official letterhead, the legal jargon, the cold finality of it all. $50,000. Due tomorrow by 5 p.m., or the bank would seize everything. The espresso machines her grandmother had saved 3 years to buy, the hand-carved wooden tables Scarlett had refinished herself, the very walls that held 6 years of memories, laughter, tears, and the scent of 1,000 perfect cups of coffee. This is fine, she whispered to the empty street, her breath fogging the glass. Everything is absolutely fine. But her voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly she was crying, hot tears mixing with the cold rain on her cheeks. She'd tried everything. Loan applications denied, investors who'd promised help then vanished, even a desperate GoFundMe that had raised exactly $217. Not even enough for 1 month's back rent, let alone the mountain of debt that had accumulated during the pandemic and never stopped growing. Her grandmother would be so disappointed. Not angry. Rosa Thorne had never been angry a day in her life, but quietly, devastatingly disappointed that Scarlett had failed to protect the legacy she'd been entrusted with. Scarlett crumpled the notice in her fist and turned away, locking the door with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The rain immediately drenched her the moment she stepped onto the sidewalk, but she barely noticed. She was already soaked through, not just her clothes, but her spirit, her hope, everything. Her ancient Honda Civic sat at the curb like a faithful dog that had seen better days. Much better days. The passenger side door was held shut with duct tape. The muffler had been making concerning noises for 3 months, and the check engine light had been on so long she'd started thinking of it as a permanent feature rather than a warning. She climbed in and turned the key. The engine ground, protested, then caught with a sound like a mechanical death rattle. The grinding noise was worse than usual, metal on metal, the kind of sound that made mechanics wince and reach for their most expensive estimate forms. "Oh, come on," Scarlett pleaded, her forehead dropping against the steering wheel. "Not today. Please, not today." She tried the ignition again. This time, the engine actually started, though it sounded like it was actively plotting her demise. She'd take it. At this point, she'd take anything that meant she could get home, crawl into bed, and forget this day had ever happened. She shifted into drive, or tried to. Her hand was shaking so badly that she fumbled the gear shift, accidentally slamming it into reverse instead. The car lurched backward, and Scarlett's foot, seeking the brake in panic, found the accelerator instead. The Civic shot into the street like it had been fired from a cannon, tires squealing on wet pavement. Scarlett screamed, jerked the wheel, and time seemed to slow down as she caught a glimpse of headlights. Massive, expensive headlights attached to what looked like a vehicle that cost more than her entire life, coming around the corner fast. Too fast. The impact, when it came, was almost beautiful in its violence. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded into 1,000 glittering fragments that caught the streetlights like falling stars. The Civic spun like a carnival ride designed by someone who hated happiness, and Scarlett's last coherent thought before the world became a kaleidoscope of motion and sound was that her insurance definitely, absolutely, 100% did not cover this level of catastrophic disaster. The Civic came to rest facing the wrong direction, its hood crumpled like an accordion and steam rising from somewhere beneath it in angry white plumes. Scarlett sat frozen in the driver's seat, hands still clenched on the wheel, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Behind her, someone was shouting. No, not shouting. Roaring. The kind of rage that made the air itself feel dangerous. Scarlett's door didn't want to open at first, the impact having warped the frame, but she threw her shoulder against it until it gave way with a metallic shriek. She practically fell out onto the rain-slicked pavement, her legs unsteady as a newborn deer's. The other vehicle, a massive black SUV that probably cost 6 figures, looked like it had been kissed by an angry god. The entire driver's side was caved in, doors crumpled, windows shattered. It was totaled. Absolutely, completely, undeniably totaled. And the man standing beside it looked ready to commit murder. He was tall, at least 6'3", with the kind of build that suggested he could bench press a small car. Or throw one, if the mood struck him. His suit was expensive, the kind of tailored perfection that Scarlett had only seen in magazine advertisements, now soaked through and splattered with broken glass. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a jaw that looked like it could cut diamonds. He was also holding a phone to his ear with one hand, while his other hand was... Scarlett blinked, certain she was seeing things. His other hand was behind his back. No, not just behind his back. They were bound there, wrists caught in what looked like industrial zip ties, the thick kind that police used on particularly dangerous suspects. I don't care what you have to do. He was snarling into the phone, his voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate in Scarlett's chest. Find me another car in 10 minutes or... He stopped mid-sentence when he spotted her approaching. His eyes were the color of dark chocolate with flecks of gold that caught the streetlight, and they were currently promising her a slow and extremely painful death. Look, Scarlett started, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. I am so sorry. My insurance will totally cover this. She paused, reality crashing over her like a wave. Well, maybe. Actually. Probably not. But I'll figure something out, I promise. I just need to call. She never got to finish that sentence. 3 more black SUVs came screaming around the corner, tires smoking on the wet pavement. They were identical to the wrecked vehicle, same make, same model, same ominous tinted windows that screamed organized crime or government conspiracy. The man's expression changed in an instant, shifting from rage to something that looked almost like fear. Almost. Because men like him, men who wore suits that were expensive and carried themselves like apex predators, probably didn't feel fear the way normal people did. Get in the car, he said, his voice suddenly urgent. Drive. Now. What? Scarlett stared at him like he'd lost his mind. I'm not going to. Get in the car. Each word was bitten off, sharp as broken glass. Or we're both dead in the next 30 seconds. One of the approaching SUV's sunroofs slid open, and Scarlett caught a glimpse of something that made her blood turn to ice. A man rising from the opening, arms raised, hands gripping what was very definitely, unmistakably, a very large gun. Training and common sense screamed at her to run. Every instinct said this was insane, that getting involved would be the worst decision of her life, that she should sprint in the opposite direction and let whatever was happening play out without her. But there was something in the man's eyes, not just fear, but a kind of desperate, wild determination that made her think he wasn't lying. That whatever was coming for him wouldn't care about innocent bystanders. Wouldn't care that she was just a broke coffee shop owner who'd had the worst timing in the universe. And maybe, somewhere deep in the chaos of her thoughts, a small voice whispered that she had nothing left to lose anyway. Scarlett ran. Not away from the wrecked Civic, but toward it. She threw herself into the driver's seat while the man somehow managed to wrench open the passenger door despite his bound hands and fold his considerable frame into her tiny car. "Drive," he barked. Before the rear window exploded. Scarlett didn't think. She slammed the gear shift into drive and floored the accelerator, and her faithful, dying Honda Civic responded like it had been saving its last burst of energy for exactly this moment. They shot forward, tires screaming in protest, leaving smoke and the smell of burning rubber in their wake. "Take the next left," the man shouted over the sound of another window shattering somewhere behind them. Scarlett yanked the wheel hard, sending them careening down a side street so fast that the Civic's tires briefly left the pavement entirely. A garbage can went flying, followed by someone's garden gnome, which shattered against a storefront window with an almost comical crash. In her rearview mirror, she could see the 3 SUVs in pursuit, their headlights cutting through the rain like the eyes of hunting wolves. "Are those people trying to kill us?" she asked, her voice climbing to a pitch that could probably shatter glass if there was any left to shatter. "Because I just wanted to get coffee this morning, and now I'm apparently in some kind of action movie, and I don't even like action movies." She took another sharp turn, this time onto a street that ran along the waterfront. The ocean was invisible in the darkness, but she could hear the waves crashing against the pier, could taste salt in the air mixing with rain and fear and adrenaline. "Lady, you just saved my life," the man said through gritted teeth, struggling against the zip ties that held his wrists. "Though your driving might still kill us both." Scarlett glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his reflection caught between her terrified eyes and the pursuing vehicles. He was handsome and that dangerous, probably has a criminal record way that her grandmother had always warned her about. Sharp features, eyes that seemed to see everything, and an intensity that made the small car feel even smaller. "What's your name?" she demanded, running a red light because stopping seemed like a spectacularly bad idea. The intersection was thankfully empty, apparently saying people stayed indoors during torrential rainstorms when armed men were conducting high-speed chases. "Damon," he replied. Damon Silvercrest. The name sounded familiar, tugging at some memory Scarlett couldn't quite place. She'd heard it before, whispered in the kinds of conversations that stopped when strangers approached. The Emerald Coast underworld was small, and certain names carried weight. This name carried the weight of mountains. "Right," Scarlett said, her voice slightly hysterical. "So, Damon Silvercrest, would you like to tell me why people with very large guns are chasing us? Because I feel like that's information I should probably have." "Long story," Damon said, twisting in his seat to look back at their pursuers. "The short version is I'm having a disagreement with some business associates about recent management decisions." "Is that what we're calling attempted murder now?" Scarlett took another corner so fast that the Civic tilted onto 2 wheels for a heart-stopping moment. A disagreement? Fair point. He actually smiled, brief and dark. "Take the next right. There's an old warehouse district, abandoned this time of night." Scarlett followed his directions, guiding the Civic through a maze of industrial streets that looked like something from a post-apocalyptic film. Rusted shipping containers, broken streetlights, buildings with windows that gaped like empty eye sockets. The pursuing SUVs had fallen back slightly, maybe confused by the twisting route, maybe just biding their time. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of what looked like it had once been a fish processing plant, but now stood empty and forgotten. She killed the engine and the lights, plunging them into darkness broken only by the occasional flash of distant lightning. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, breathing hard, listening to the rain drum against the Civic's roof and the distant wail of sirens that might or might not be related to their spectacular car chase. "Okay," Scarlett finally said, turning to face her passenger. "Here's the thing. I have no idea what just happened, but I'm pretty sure I accidentally kidnapped you, which is probably illegal." She paused, reaching into her purse. "Also, I think you might be some kind of criminal because normal people don't get chased by guys with guns." She pulled out a rubber spatula that she'd forgotten to return to the coffee shop. "So, I'm going to untie you," she continued, "but if you try to hurt me, I will absolutely use this." Damon stared at the spatula, then at her, then back at the spatula. "You're threatening me with a kitchen utensil," he said slowly, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face despite everything. "Lady, I've been threatened with knives, guns, and once a very angry lobster, but this is definitely a first." "It's Scarlett," she corrected, moving to the back seat and examining the zip ties with a critical eye. "And don't underestimate the power of good kitchen equipment. I once knocked out a guy who tried to rob my shop with a coffee grinder." She tried tugging at the plastic restraints, but they were industrial strength and cut deep into his wrists. Whoever had tied him up had wanted to make absolutely sure he couldn't escape. "These are really tight," she muttered, digging through her glove compartment for anything useful. "Who tied you up anyway?" "My business partners," Damon said, his shoulders tense. "Turns out they're not as understanding as I thought they'd be about some decisions I made recently." Scarlett finally found a nail file and began carefully sawing at the zip ties. It was slow work, but gradually the plastic began to fray. What kind of decisions make people tie someone up and apparently try to kill them? "The kind where you challenge centuries of tradition," Damon said quietly. "The kind where you try to change systems that people think shouldn't be changed." The zip tie finally gave way with a sharp snap. Damon immediately brought his hands around, wincing as blood flow returned to his wrists. Deep red marks circled them where the ties had cut in, and Scarlett noticed his hands were shaking slightly, whether from restricted circulation or something else. She couldn't tell. Now that she could see him properly in the dim light filtering through the warehouse windows, she realized he was even more imposing than she'd first thought. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made you step back without realizing you were doing it. Everything about him screamed danger, from the way he moved like a predator to the intelligence in his eyes that suggested he was always calculating, always planning several moves ahead. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now. "Gentler. You really did save my life back there." Scarlett crossed her arms, still holding her spatula defensively because she wasn't completely stupid. "Who exactly are you?" "Damon Silvercrest." "Because that name sounds really familiar, and not in a good way." Damon ran a hand through his wet hair, looking suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was clearly wearing off, leaving behind the weight of whatever had brought him to this moment. Bound, hunted, forced to rely on a stranger who'd accidentally crashed into his life. "I run certain businesses in the city," he said carefully. "Import, export, that sort of thing." Scarlett's eyes narrowed. Import and export of what exactly? "Things people want but can't always get through traditional channels." He met her gaze steadily, not apologizing, not justifying, just stating facts. "So you're like a mob boss?" His silence was answer enough. "Oh my God," Scarlett breathed, starting to pace in the small space between the Civic and a stack of rotting pallets. "Oh my God, I kidnapped a mobster. My grandmother is going to kill me. Well, if you don't kill me first." She gestured wildly with her spatula, her voice climbing higher. "This is exactly the kind of thing that happens to people in movies right before they end up in cement shoes at the bottom of the harbor." "I'm not going to hurt you," Damon said, watching her pace like she was a skittish animal he was trying not to spook. "Actually, I was hoping we could help each other." Scarlett stopped mid-step and stared at him. "Help each other? How exactly could I possibly help someone like you? Those men back there, they're not just after me. They're after anyone who might have information about my business operations." His expression turned serious, grave. "By helping me escape, you've painted a target on your back too. But I can protect you. I just need somewhere to lay low for a few days while I figure out my next move." Scarlett's laugh was slightly hysterical. "Let me get this straight. You want me to hide a crime boss? In what? My studio apartment above the coffee shop that's about to be foreclosed on." She waved her hands dramatically. "Because that's definitely going to end well for everyone involved." "Actually," Damon said slowly, pulling out his phone, which had somehow survived their adventure intact, "I might be able to help with your foreclosure problem." Scarlett froze. What do you mean? I heard you mention it earlier. How much do you owe? $50,000, she said quietly, the number falling like a stone between them. The bank wants it all by tomorrow, or they take everything. Damon's fingers moved across his phone screen with quick, practiced efficiency. Consider it handled. In exchange, I just need a place to stay for a week. Maybe 2. Scarlett's mouth fell open. You're joking. I never joke about money, Damon said, already typing something into his phone. Or about favors. You saved my life tonight, Scarlett. That's a debt I don't take lightly. But you can't just throw around $50,000 like it's pocket change. She was pacing again, her mind racing. What's the catch? Because there's always a catch. Always. No catch. He slid his phone back into his jacket, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath hitch. I will help you save your coffee shop. You help me stay alive. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. He looked around the abandoned warehouse with obvious distaste. Besides, I'm fairly certain hiding here won't end well for either of us. Scarlett looked down at her car keys, then back at Damon. Her rational mind screamed that this was insane, that she should run as far and fast as possible, that getting involved with someone like him was signing her own death warrant. But her coffee shop, her grandmother's legacy, her only connection to the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, was going to be seized in less than 24 hours. And here was a man offering to save it, asking for nothing more than a place to hide. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was quite possibly the worst decision she'd ever make. If I say yes, she said slowly, and that's a very big if, there have to be rules. No illegal activities in my apartment. No weapons. No mysterious phone calls at 3 in the morning. And absolutely not bringing work home with you. A smile tugged at the corner of Damon's mouth. Fair enough. Though I should probably mention that my work has a tendency to follow me around whether I invite it or not. As if on cue, the sound of engines echoed from somewhere outside the warehouse. Distant but getting closer. Speaking of which, Damon said, grabbing Scarlett's hand, we should probably continue this conversation somewhere else. His hand was warm despite the cold rain, and Scarlett noticed with an odd flutter in her stomach that his grip was firm but careful, like he was very aware of his own strength and making sure not to hurt her. They ran back to the Civic, though ran was generous for what her dying car was still capable of, and escaped into the night, leaving behind the warehouse and the approaching hunters and the last remnants of Scarlett's normal life. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. And it all started with a collision in the rain. Chapter 2. Threshold of Shadows. The apartment was exactly what Damon had expected from someone who ran a struggling coffee shop, small, cluttered, and filled with the kind of mismatched furniture that told stories of garage sales and thrift store discoveries. What he hadn't expected was how it would make him feel. Warm. Safe. Real. Plants hung from every available surface, their leaves catching what little light filtered through the rain-streaked windows. Books were stacked in towering, precarious piles that defied both logic and gravity. The walls were covered with photographs, Scarlett with an elderly woman who must have been her grandmother, Scarlett at what looked like culinary school, Scarlett laughing with friends at the beach. A life captured in frozen moments. Everything smelled like vanilla and coffee beans, with an underlying hint of cinnamon that made something in Damon's chest tighten unexpectedly. Welcome to my palace, Scarlett said with heavy sarcasm, dropping her keys on a table that might have been white once upon a time. Water dripped from her clothes onto hardwood floors that had seen better decades. The couch pulls out into a bed, though I should warn you it's about as comfortable as sleeping on a pile of rocks wrapped in sandpaper. She gestured vaguely toward a narrow hallway. Bathrooms down there. The hot water takes about 5 minutes to kick in, and sometimes the shower makes a sound like a dying whale, but it works. Another gesture, this time toward a space barely large enough for one person. The kitchen is, well, you can see the kitchen. Damon looked around with genuine interest, his trained eye cataloging exits, sight lines, and potential defensive positions. But underneath the tactical assessment, he felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in the sterile perfection of his penthouse across town. This place felt lived in. Loved. Like every object had been chosen not for its value, but for what it meant. "It's nice," he said, and meant it. Scarlett snorted, peeling off her soaked jacket and hanging it on a hook by the door. That's a polite way of saying tiny and falling apart. She moved toward the kitchen, her movements efficient despite the cramped space. "Are you hungry? Because stress makes me cook, and I'm currently stressed enough to feed a small army." Damon realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten. The day had been one crisis after another. The emergency pack meeting, the ambush, the betrayal, the zip ties. Food hadn't exactly been a priority. "What are you making?" he asked, genuinely curious as he watched her pull ingredients from various cabinets with the confidence of someone who'd navigated this space 1,000 times in the dark. "Grilled cheese," Scarlett said like it was obvious, like it was the only possible answer. She began pulling out different types of bread, 3 varieties of cheese, and ingredients Damon couldn't even identify. "And before you say anything about it being simple, I make the best grilled cheese in 3 states. It's an art form." Damon found himself smiling despite everything. "I'll be the judge of that." Scarlett moved around her tiny kitchen like a conductor leading an orchestra, her earlier panic replaced by focused intensity. She sliced bread with the precision of a surgeon, examined cheese like a jeweler appraising diamonds, and assembled ingredients with a care that suggested this was far more than just making a sandwich. "The secret," she said, her voice taking on a lecturing quality that made Damon think she'd explained this before, "is in the layering. Most people just slap some cheese between 2 pieces of bread and call it good." She looked up at him, her brown eyes fierce with conviction. "Those people are monsters." Damon leaned against the counter, or what passed for a counter in the cramped space, fascinated despite himself. In his world, food came from expensive restaurants or was prepared by professional chefs. He'd eaten meals that cost more than most people made in a week, sat across from world leaders and crime bosses over plates of carefully constructed cuisine. But he'd never watched someone cook with such passionate intensity over something as simple as grilled cheese. "You're very serious about this," he observed. "Food is love," Scarlett said, buttering the bread with careful strokes, each movement deliberate. "My grandmother taught me that. She said you can tell everything about a person by how they treat food and how they treat people when they're hungry." She heated the pan to what Damon assumed was the perfect temperature, though he had no reference point for such things. The butter began to sizzle, and the small kitchen filled with a sound and smell that was somehow more comforting than any 5-star meal he'd ever experienced. "So, what does that say about you?" Scarlett asked, placing the sandwich in the pan with the care of an artist setting a masterpiece. "When is the last time you cooked something yourself?" Damon had to think about it. Really think about it. His childhood flashed through his memory, his father's rigid rules, the formal dinners where showing too much enthusiasm for food was considered weak, the way eating had become just another performance of control and dominance. "I honestly can't remember," he admitted. "I usually eat out or have food delivered." Scarlett looked at him with something that might have been pity. "That's sad." She flipped the sandwich with expert timing, revealing a golden brown surface that looked like it belonged in a cookbook. "Cooking is therapeutic. It's creating something from nothing, making something ordinary into something special." The cheese had begun to melt, stretching between the 2 pieces of bread in long, perfect strings. The smell was intoxicating: butter, toasted bread, melting cheese, and something else. Something that might have been care, or attention, or love transformed into tangible form. "Is that why you open a coffee shop?" Damon asked, watching her movements with an attention that surprised him. "To feed people?" "Partly." Scarlett slid the sandwich onto a plate, then began making a second one. "But mostly because I believe everyone deserves a place where they feel welcome, where they can sit and think or talk or just exist without judgment. Where someone knows their order and asks about their day and actually cares about the answer." She paused, her hands stilling over the second sandwich. "My grandmother used to say that the world was too cold, too hard, too focused on efficiency and profit. She said we needed more places that existed just to make people feel human again." Damon felt something shift in his chest. That philosophy, creating spaces where people could simply exist without fear, without judgment, without having to perform dominance or submission, that was exactly what he'd been trying to do with the pack. Exactly what had gotten him zip-tied and marked for death by people who thought the old ways were the only ways. "Your grandmother sounds like she was an incredible woman," he said softly. "She was." Scarlett's smile was sad and warm at the same time. "She died 3 years ago. Left me the coffee shop and a recipe book and a lifetime of lessons about kindness." She finished the second sandwich and plated it. "Sometimes I think I'm failing her legacy. The shop is drowning in debt. I can barely keep the lights on. And tomorrow, well, yesterday I thought tomorrow it would all be gone." She brought both plates to the small dining table, really just a card table with 2 folding chairs, and set one in front of Damon. The grilled cheese was, Damon had to admit, probably the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen on a plate. Perfectly golden on the outside, with cheese that stretched in long, glorious strings when pulled apart. The bread had a crisp that suggested ideal temperature and timing, and the cheese blend created a complexity of flavors he hadn't known was possible in something so simple. He ate it slowly, savoring each bite while Scarlett watched him with obvious satisfaction. "Okay," he said finally, setting down the sandwich. "You win." "This is incredible." Scarlett beamed like he'd just awarded her a Michelin star. "Told you. My secret weapon against the forces of evil." She took a bite of her own sandwich, and for a moment they just sat there in companionable silence, 2 strangers brought together by chaos, sharing a meal in a tiny apartment while rain drummed against the windows, and somewhere in the city, dangerous people searched for them both. "So, Damon Silvercrest," Scarlett said eventually, "tell me something true. Something that's not about business or money or whatever it is you do when you're not being chased by bad guys." Damon considered the question while chewing thoughtfully. No one had asked him something like that in years. Maybe ever. In his world, every conversation was a negotiation, every personal detail a potential weakness to be exploited. But sitting here in this warm, cluttered apartment with a woman who'd saved his life and threatened him with kitchen utensils, something made him want to answer honestly. "I used to want to be a teacher," he said eventually. The words felt rusty, like he was speaking a language he'd forgotten. "Elementary school. I thought it would be nice to help kids learn to read, to watch them discover that books could take them anywhere." Scarlett's eyebrows shot up. "Really? What happened?" "Life happened. Family expectations. Poor choices." He set down his sandwich, the perfect food suddenly tasting like ash as memories rose. "My father had very specific ideas about what his sons would become. Teaching wasn't on the approved list." "And what was on the list?" Scarlett asked gently. "Taking over the family business. Learning to lead through fear. Becoming the kind of man who makes people look away when he walks into a room." Damon's jaw tightened. Becoming him. The rain intensified outside, battering the windows like it was trying to get in. Or maybe like it was trying to wash away the past, scrub clean all the decisions and compromises and moments where he'd chosen survival over his soul. "What about you?" Damon asked, needing to shift the focus away from memories that still had teeth. Was the coffee shop owner always the dream? Scarlett's laugh was rueful. "I wanted to be a veterinarian. I had the grades, the passion, everything." She looked around her small apartment, her expression wistful. "But vet school is expensive, and life has a way of redirecting your plans. My grandmother got sick and needed someone to help run the shop. I told myself it was temporary, just until I saved enough money to go back to school. And 5 years later, here you are," Damon finished softly. 5 years later, here I am." She took another bite of her sandwich, chewing slowly. 20 years old, and it feels too late some days. Especially when I'm about to lose everything I've worked for. "It's not too late," Damon said, and he meant it. "You're 28, not 88. You could still." His phone chimed, cutting through the moment like a blade. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Problem?" Scarlett asked, noting the sudden tension in his shoulders. "My people are looking for me. Damon said, reading the cascade of increasingly worried messages from Elias. They're concerned. That was putting it mildly. Elias's texts painted a picture of barely contained chaos, pack members demanding action, younger wolves pushing for immediate retaliation, the entire carefully balanced structure Damon had built threatening to collapse in his absence. His phone rang before he could respond to the texts. He looked at the caller ID and sighed. I have to take this, he said, standing up from the table. It's my second in command. If I don't answer, he'll assume I'm dead and start a war. Scarlett watched as Damon answered the phone, his entire demeanor changing from relaxed dinner companion to someone clearly in charge of dangerous people. Elias, I'm fine, he said, his voice taking on an authoritative tone she hadn't heard before. No, don't retaliate yet. I need 48 hours to sort this out. She could hear shouting from the other end of the line, though she couldn't make out the words. Damon walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below while he listened. Because if you start shooting up the city, it'll bring unwanted attention from people we'd rather avoid right now, he said patiently, his free hand rubbing his temple like he was getting a headache. Trust me on this. More shouting. Damon's jaw tightened. Elias, listen to me carefully. I am giving you a direct order. No retaliation until I say otherwise. Find out who ordered the hit and why, but don't engage. Is that clear? There was a pause. Then Damon nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Good. I'll check in tomorrow. He hung up and turned back to Scarlett, who was staring at him with wide eyes. So, she said slowly, that sounded very mob bossy. Just so you know. Damon had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I told you I run certain businesses. Sometimes those businesses require firm management. And by firm management, you mean telling people not to shoot up the city. Among other things, yes. Scarlett stood up, gathering their plates even though neither of them had finished eating. I'm going to be honest with you, Damon. I have approximately zero experience with this kind of thing. My biggest crisis before today was running out of oat milk during the morning rush. I have no idea how to help someone who needs to prevent gang wars or whatever it is you're dealing with. You're already helping, Damon said quietly. More than you know. That night, sleep proved elusive for both of them. Scarlett lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of Damon moving around in her living room. She could hear him pacing, long, restless strides that suggested a predator in a cage too small to contain it. Around midnight, she heard what sounded like him talking to himself in a low voice, words she couldn't make out but that carried the weight of worry and planning. At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep entirely. She padded to the kitchen for water, moving quietly so as not to startle her dangerous houseguest. Damon was standing at the window again, his silhouette backlit by the streetlights outside. But something was different. His posture was wrong, too tense, too coiled, like every muscle was prepared to spring into action. And his eyes, when he turned toward her, reflected the streetlight in a way that seemed almost. She blinked, and the impression was gone. Just a trick of the light and her exhausted mind. Couldn't sleep either? She asked softly, trying not to startle him. Damon stepped back from the window, and when he emerged more fully into the dim light of her kitchen, he looked normal again. Just a man in an expensive suit who'd had a very long, very terrible day. Sorry, did I wake you? His voice was rough, strained. No, I was already awake. Stress insomnia. She filled a glass with water and offered it to him. You seemed restless. Is everything okay? Damon took the glass but didn't drink from it. His hands, she noticed, were trembling slightly. The full moon is tomorrow night, he said, which seemed like a non sequitur. Does that bother you? Scarlett asked, confused. Some people get weird about full moons. My cousin swears they make her customers extra crazy at the salon. Something like that. Damon set down the water glass, his dark eyes finding hers. Scarlett, there's something else I should probably tell you about myself. Something that might change how you feel about our arrangement. The serious tone of his voice made her stomach flutter with anxiety. After everything that had already happened, the car crash, the chase, the agreement to hide a crime boss in her apartment, What could possibly make this situation worse? What kind of something? She asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Because I feel like I've hit my quota of life-changing revelations for one day. Damon sat down the water glass and looked directly at her, his gaze steady and unflinching. I'm not entirely human. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and impossibility. Scarlett blinked at him several times, her exhausted brain trying to process what he'd just said. I'm sorry. What did you just say? She let out a slightly hysterical laugh. Because it sounded like you said you're not human, which would be crazy, right? Please tell me that's not what you said. Damon ran his hands through his hair, looking more nervous than she'd seen him all day. And she'd seen him zip-tied and running from armed men, so that was saying something. I'm a werewolf, Scarlett, he said quietly. The crime family I run, it's a pack. We're all werewolves. For a long moment, Scarlett just stared at him. Then she started laughing. Not the amused kind of laughter, but the slightly hysterical kind that comes when your brain can't process any more weirdness and just decides to short-circuit instead. A werewolf, she repeated between giggles that threatened to turn into sobs. You're telling me I accidentally kidnapped the leader of a werewolf crime family. She wiped tears from her eyes. Of course I did. Because my life wasn't complicated enough already. She paced to the other side of her small kitchen, still laughing in that unhinged way. What's next? Are you going to tell me vampires are real too? Maybe some zombies for good measure? Oh. Are there dragons? Please tell me there are dragons, because, at this point, why not? Vampires are real, but they mostly stick to the East Coast, Damon said seriously. And zombies are just a myth, though there was this one guy in Portland who came pretty close. Scarlett's laughter stopped abruptly. She turned to face him, her expression caught between disbelief and dawning horror. You're not joking, are you? Damon shook his head. I wish I was. Look, I know this is a lot to take in. A lot to take in? Scarlett interrupted, her voice rising. Damon, I thought I was harboring a regular criminal. Now you're telling me I'm harboring a supernatural criminal. There's a difference. She started pacing again, her hands gesticulating wildly. A big difference. Do you eat people? The question burst out before she could stop it. Please tell me you don't eat people. I don't eat people, Damon said quickly. We don't work like that. We're not monsters, Scarlett. We're just different. He watched her pace, his expression careful and controlled. Most of the time, I'm exactly like any other person. The wolf side only comes out during full moons or times of extreme stress. Extreme stress like being chased by people with guns? Scarlett asked, stopping her pacing to stare at him. Is that why your eyes looked weird before? Damon nodded reluctantly. The wolf doesn't like being trapped or threatened. It takes a lot of control to keep it contained in situations like that. Scarlett sat down heavily on her couch, trying to wrap her mind around this new information. 6 months ago, if someone had told her that werewolves were real, she would have recommended therapy. Now she was sitting in her apartment with one, discussing the finer points of lycanthropy, like it was a normal Tuesday night conversation. Except it was Thursday. Or was it Friday now? She'd lost track. So the people who were chasing you today, she said slowly, were they werewolves too? Some of them, yes. The pack is having internal issues. Damon's expression turned grim. There's a faction that thinks I'm too soft in my leadership style. They want someone more traditional in charge. Someone who leads the old way. Traditional how? Old school pack dynamics are very hierarchical. Might make right. The strongest wolf leads. Everyone else follows without question or faces punishment. He leaned against the counter, his posture tense. I prefer a more collaborative approach, which some members see as weakness. And they decided to express their disapproval by tying you up and apparently planning to kill you, Scarlett said flatly. Damon's jaw tightened. The plan was to remove me from power and install someone more agreeable to their vision. Permanently. The way he said permanently made Scarlett's stomach drop. So, when you said I saved your life, you meant it literally. Very literally. He met her gaze steadily. And now, by association, you're involved whether we like it or not. Those people know you helped me escape. They'll be looking for both of us. Scarlett pulled a throw pillow against her chest, hugging it like it might protect her from this new reality. This is insane. All of it. Werewolves, pack politics, people trying to kill each other over leadership styles. She looked up at him. Why are you telling me this now? You could have just kept it secret. Because tomorrow night is the full moon, Damon said quietly. And being around a werewolf during transformation isn't like being around a regular person. There are complications. I thought you deserved to know what you're getting into before it's too late to back out. Too late. Scarlett laughed, but there was no humor in it. Damon, I'm pretty sure it was too late the moment I reversed into your SUV. She stood up, still clutching the pillow, and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass, the emerald coast looking both familiar and suddenly alien. How many other supernatural creatures were out there, hiding in plain sight? How many times had she served coffee to vampires or witches, or who knew what else, without realizing? I need you to understand something, Damon said, moving to stand beside her, but keeping careful distance. I'm telling you this because I respect you. Because you've already proven you're brave and clever and adaptable. But also because you have a right to choose, really choose, whether you want to be involved in this world. He gestured toward the door. If you want to walk away right now, I'll understand. I'll make sure the money for your coffee shop goes through either way. You helped me when you didn't have to, and I don't forget debts. Scarlett turned to look at him, really look at him. This man, this werewolf, who'd crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. He was dangerous, yes. Connected to a world of violence and impossible things, absolutely. But he was also honest, at least about this. He could have kept lying, could have hidden what he was until it was too late for her to do anything about it. Instead, he was giving her a choice. If I stay, she said slowly, what happens tomorrow night? During the full moon? I'll need to secure myself somewhere, Damon explained. The transformation is intense. Most of my people have places they go, protocols they follow. I usually lock myself in a reinforced room in my penthouse until it's over. Will you hurt me? The question was blunt, but she needed to know. Not if I'm properly contained, Damon said honestly. The wolf recognizes the pack, recognizes the allies. But you're human, and you're new. The instinct might be to see you as a threat or prey until it learns otherwise. That's not comforting. I know, which is why I'm telling you all this now, while there's still time for you to decide this is too much. Scarlett looked back out at the city, her mind racing. She thought about her grandmother, about the lessons on kindness and seeing people for who they were rather than what they appeared to be. She thought about the coffee shop, about creating spaces where people could feel welcome and safe. She thought about Damon's eyes when he talked about wanting to be a teacher, about the weight he carried trying to lead differently than his father had. I'm terrified, she finally admitted. Everything about this scares me. That's a reasonable response, Damon said quietly. But, she continued, turning to face him fully, I'm not going to run. If what you're saying is true about being in danger because I helped you, then running won't actually help anyway, right? They'll still come looking for me. Probably, Damon admitted. Then I might as well stay and see this through. She managed a shaky smile. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat something besides takeout and learn to appreciate the art of a good grilled cheese. Something in Damon's expression softened. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm an idiot, Scarlett corrected. But apparently I'm an idiot who's decided to help hide a werewolf mob boss. So we might as well figure out the logistics. They spent the next hour discussing practical matters, what Damon would need for the full moon, how they'd secure the apartment, what Scarlett should do if something went wrong. The conversation was surreal, planning for lycanthropic transformation like they were discussing grocery shopping. But underneath the practical details, Scarlett felt something shifting. Her world had expanded in a single night, breaking open to reveal depths and possibilities she'd never imagined. It was terrifying. It was also, in a strange way, exhilarating. Thank you, Damon said as the sky began to lighten with approaching dawn. For not running. For being willing to listen. He paused, searching for words. For seeing me as a person, and not just a monster. You're welcome, Scarlett said. Though I reserve the right to change my mind if you start howling at the moon or eating my houseplants. Damon's laugh was surprised and genuine. Deal. As the sun rose over the Emerald Coast, casting golden light through the rain-washed city, Scarlett and Damon sat in her tiny apartment and watched the new day begin. Both of them exhausted, both of them changed by the last 12 hours in ways they were only beginning to understand. Neither of them knew what the next full moon would bring. Neither of them realized how deep the conspiracy against Damon ran, or how many people were already searching for them both. But for this moment, in the quiet dawn, they had something precious, an alliance forged in chaos, a growing trust between two people from different worlds. And perhaps, though neither would admit it yet, the beginning of something more. Chapter 3: Secrets and Silver. Morning brought harsh reality along with weak sunlight filtering through storm clouds that refused to fully break. Scarlett woke to the smell of coffee, rich, dark, and perfectly brewed, which was confusing because she distinctly remembered being too exhausted to set up the automatic timer on her machine. She stumbled out of her bedroom, still wearing yesterday's clothes that she'd been too tired to change out of, and found Damon in her kitchen, looking far too alert for someone who'd spent the night on her torture device of a pull-out couch. "Please tell me you didn't break into my coffee supplies," she said, accepting the mug he offered her with the desperation of the severely undercaffeinated. She took a sip and her eyes widened. It was perfect. Not just good. Perfect. The exact temperature, the ideal strength, with notes of chocolate and caramel that suggested he'd found her special beans, the ones she saved for particularly bad days. "How did you?" she started. "I may have spent some time learning about coffee before investing in several shops around the city," Damon said with a slight smile. "Legal shops," he added quickly when he saw her expression. "Completely legitimate businesses that pay taxes and everything." "Of course you did." Scarlett settled at her small table, cradling the coffee like a lifeline. "Is there anything you don't have your fingers in?" "I try to diversify." Damon joined her at the table, his own mug steaming between his hands. He looked tired. She noticed shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday, a tension in his shoulders that suggested the pull-out couch had been even less comfortable than advertised. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing the surreal fact that this was happening. That she was having morning coffee with a werewolf crime boss in her tiny apartment. That this was somehow her life now. Damon's phone buzzed, shattering the fragile peace. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "Problem?" Scarlett asked, though she already knew the answer. "We might have a complication." He turned the phone to show her a text message accompanied by a photo. The photo showed her coffee shop, Crimson Brew, with several men in dark suits standing outside. They weren't even trying to be subtle, just watching the building with the kind of patient intensity that made it clear they'd wait as long as necessary. "They found us already?" Scarlett's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor in an explosion of ceramic and dark liquid. "How is that possible?" "We were so careful." Damon was already moving toward the window, staying carefully out of sight as he peered down at the street below. "They're good at what they do. And they probably figured I'd seek help from someone civilian, someone they wouldn't expect." Scarlett joined him at the window, crouching low to avoid being seen. She could count at least 3 men positioned strategically around her building, trying to look casual but failing spectacularly. One was pretending to read a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper which nobody did anymore. Another was smoking a cigarette and checking his phone every 30 seconds. The third wasn't even pretending, just standing there with the kind of stillness that suggested a predator waiting for prey. "How many of them are there?" she whispered, as if they might somehow hear her through the walls and windows. "At least 3 that I can see from this angle. Probably more positioned where we can't spot them." Damon pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. "The good news is they won't want to cause a scene in broad daylight with civilian witnesses around. The bad news is they're not going anywhere until they get what they want." "And what they want is you," Scarlett said, her stomach sinking. "What they want is to finish what they started yesterday." His fingers continued flying across the screen. "But we're not going to give them that opportunity." "What are you doing?" Scarlett asked, watching him send what looked like a very long text message. Calling in some favors. I have people who can create a distraction. Give us a window to get out of here. He looked at her seriously, his dark eyes intense. But once we leave, there's no going back to your normal life until this is resolved. These people don't give up easily, Scarlett. They'll use anything and anyone to get to me. Scarlett felt a flood of panic wash over her. What about my coffee shop? I can't just abandon it. What about my customers? Her voice rose slightly. Mrs. Patterson comes in every morning at 8:30 for her lavender latte. If I'm not there, she'll think something terrible happened. Scarlett, Damon's voice was gentle but firm. Something terrible has happened. These people will use anything and anyone to get to me, including innocent customers. If Mrs. Patterson walks into your shop while my enemies are watching it, she becomes leverage. She becomes a target. The reality of that statement hit Scarlett like a physical blow. She'd been thinking about this as her problem, her danger. But it wasn't. Every person who walked through her door, every regular who depended on their morning ritual, every stranger who just wanted a quiet place to work, they'd all be at risk. So, what you're saying is that by helping you, I've basically destroyed my entire life. Her voice came out hollow. My shop, my routine, my customers, everything. Damon was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried genuine regret. I'm saying that I'm going to fix this. And when I do, you'll have your life back. Plus the $50,000 and the knowledge that you helped save someone's life. Great, Scarlett muttered. I can put that on my tombstone. Here lies Scarlett Thorne, who helped a werewolf and lost everything. You won't lose everything, Damon said firmly. I promise you that. 20 minutes later, a food truck pulled up directly in front of Scarlett's building, followed by what appeared to be a small parade of street performers. Within minutes, the sidewalk was crowded with people buying lunch and watching a man juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. A second performer, a woman in a sparkling costume, was doing some kind of interpretive dance with ribbons that somehow kept getting tangled around the suited men trying to maintain their surveillance positions. Friends of yours? Scarlett asked, watching the scene unfold from her window with a mixture of amazement and disbelief. The suited men were trying to maintain their positions while navigating around a growing crowd of onlookers and a surprisingly aggressive taco vendor who seemed determined to sell them lunch, whether they wanted it or not. I have diverse business connections, Damon said diplomatically. Elias coordinated this. We have about 10 minutes before they figure out what's happening and adjust their positions. Scarlett grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing clothes into it with no particular organization. Jeans, sweaters, her favorite hoodie. Enough coffee beans to supply a small cafe. Her hands were shaking as she added her toothbrush and the few toiletries she couldn't live without. Where exactly are we going? She asked, zipping up the bag with more force than necessary. I have a safe house across town. It's not fancy, but it's secure and off the grid. Damon shouldered his own bag, which she noticed contained significantly fewer items than hers, but probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. No one outside my inner circle knows about it. Define not fancy, Scarlett said, following him toward the back stairs. Because after yesterday, my standards have become remarkably flexible. It has running water, electricity, and neighbors who mind their own business, Damon replied, checking his phone for updates from his people positioned around the building. Everything else is negotiable. They made their way down the back stairs, moving quickly but quietly. Damon went first, his movements controlled and alert, checking each corner before signaling her to follow. Scarlett tried to mimic his caution, though she felt clumsy and obvious in comparison. The back alley was clear for now. Damon's phone vibrated with updates. We have 3 minutes before they realize the distraction was intentional and start expanding their search pattern, he said, checking his watch. Stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back, don't wait for me, just run. I'm not leaving you, Scarlett said stubbornly. Scarlett.
No.
She adjusted her duffel bag on her shoulder, meeting his eyes with determination she didn't entirely feel. We're in this together now. For better or worse, you're stuck with me until this is over. Something flickered in Damon's expression. Surprise, respect, maybe something warmer. You're going to be in trouble, aren't you? Probably, Scarlett admitted. I've been told I have authority issues. They moved quickly through the alley, sticking to shadows where possible. The sounds of the street performance drifted over the buildings, cheering crowds, the taco vendor shouting about his specials, someone's phone playing music that clashed beautifully with the chaos. Damon led her through a maze of back streets and service alleys that Scarlett had never known existed, despite living in this neighborhood for 6 years. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every escape route, every hidden passage, every place where the city's geometry created pockets of invisibility. They emerged several blocks from her apartment, near a parking garage where a nondescript sedan sat waiting. Elias stood beside it, a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of alert, watchful expression that suggested military background. Alpha, Elias said, opening the rear door. His eyes swept over Scarlett with quick assessment, noting everything, judging nothing. Ma'am. This is Scarlett, Damon said, ushering her into the car. She's under my protection. Spread the word. Elias nodded, understanding passing between the two men in that brief exchange. The safe house is ready. Aurora and Titan are already there, securing the perimeter. Good. Damon climbed in beside Scarlett, and Elias took the driver's seat. As they pulled into traffic, Scarlett looked back at her neighborhood disappearing behind them. Somewhere in those streets was her coffee shop, her apartment, her entire life. And she was leaving it all behind because she'd reversed into the wrong SUV on the wrong night. Hey, Damon said quietly, drawing her attention. We're going to fix this. I promise. Scarlett wanted to believe him. But as the city slid past the windows and they drove toward an uncertain future, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The safe house turned out to be a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that had definitely seen better days. The buildings were older, the streets a little rougher, but there was a lived-in quality that suggested a functioning community rather than urban decay. Cozy, Scarlett said, dropping her duffel bag by the door and taking in the aggressively neutral decor. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige couch that looked like it had come from a furniture store's clearance section. Very beige. That's the point, Damon said, checking the locks on the door, multiple deadbolts, she noticed, along with what looked like a security bar. No one would expect me to hide somewhere this ordinary. My usual residences are a bit more conspicuous. He showed her around the small space, pointing out the security features that weren't immediately obvious. Reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, and what appeared to be a very sophisticated alarm system hidden behind innocuous-looking wall plates. The previous tenant was a federal witness, Damon explained when Scarlett raised an eyebrow at the security setup. We acquired the property when he no longer needed it. Scarlett decided not to ask what no longer needed it meant. Some things were probably better left to imagination. How long do we have to stay here? She asked instead, moving to the window and peering through the blinds at the quiet street below. A few days, maybe a week. Long enough for me to figure out who's behind the coup attempt and how to handle it without starting a war. Damon's phone rang before Scarlett could respond. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression grew increasingly serious as he listened. Are you certain? He asked, his voice tight. How many? Scarlett watched his face change as whoever was on the other end spoke. She saw the exact moment the situation went from bad to worse, saw the way his shoulders tensed and his jaw clenched. Understood. Keep monitoring and report any changes. He ended the call and looked at Scarlett with an expression that made her stomach drop. That didn't sound good, she said. The situation is more complicated than I thought. Damon sat down heavily on the beige couch. It's not just a few disgruntled pack members. There's another pack involved, one from the northern reaches. They're trying to expand their territory into the Emerald Coast, and they're using the internal discord in my pack as an opportunity. Scarlett sat down beside him, trying to process this new information. So, you're dealing with a rebellion from within and an invasion from outside. Essentially, yes. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she was beginning to recognize. The Northern Pack is led by an alpha named Victor Frostbane. He's old school, believes in expansion through conquest. He's probably been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment happened to be when your own people decided to stage a coup, Scarlett said. That seems like a pretty big coincidence. Damon looked at her sharply. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that maybe it's not a coincidence. What if someone in your pack has been working with this Victor? They create the internal conflict as a distraction, weakening your defenses, so the Northern Pack can move in. Damon stared at her like she'd just solved a puzzle he'd been struggling with for weeks. That actually makes a lot of sense. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages and emails with new urgency. If there's a traitor coordinating with Victor, then everything that's happened, the ambush, the timing, even knowing where to find us, it all fits. Who in your pack would have access to that kind of information? Scarlett asked. Who knows your schedules, your security protocols? My inner circle, Damon said grimly. Elias, my second in command. Aurora, who handles security. Titan, who coordinates our business operations. He paused, his expression darkening. And Marcus, my brother. Scarlett heard the pain in his voice when he mentioned his brother. Tell me about Marcus. Damon was quiet for a long moment, staring at his phone without really seeing it. Marcus thinks I'm too soft. Too willing to work with humans and other supernatural communities. He believes werewolves should be at the top of the food chain, not playing politics with vampires and witches. Does he have support within the pack? Some. Especially among the older members who remember my father's more traditional leadership style. Damon's jaw tightened. My father believed in werewolf supremacy. Humans were resources to be used or obstacles to be removed. He ran the pack like a military unit, absolute authority, zero tolerance for dissent. Scarlett could hear the pain in his voice even though he was trying to keep his tone neutral. And Marcus wants to go back to that. Marcus thinks our father had the right idea about pack leadership. He's never forgiven me for changing how we operate, for building alliances instead of conquering territory. Damon's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He read it and showed it to Scarlett. From Marcus, the pack needs strong leadership. Tonight we decide who provides it. The message was brief but ominous, carrying the weight of formal challenge. That's a challenge, isn't it? Scarlett asked, reading the text twice. It is. Damon's voice was flat. Marcus is calling for a leadership trial during tomorrow night's full moon. If I don't show up, I forfeit my position by default. And if you do show up, you fight him, Scarlett finished. To the death. Traditionally, yes. Damon's smile was bitter. Though I've been hoping to modernize that particular tradition. Marcus, however, is a traditionalist in all things. Scarlett stood up and began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. What if this isn't just about pack leadership? What if Marcus and Victor are working together? Think about it. Marcus creates internal conflict, weakening your position. Victor uses that as an excuse to move in and restore order. They split the territory afterward. Damon stared at her timeline spread across his phone, pieces clicking into place. If you're right, then this has been planned for months. Marcus has been undermining my authority from within while Victor positioned his pack for invasion. He started scrolling through old messages and emails with a new purpose. Here, he said, showing Scarlett a series of text exchanges. Marcus has been asking a lot of questions about our alliance agreements, security protocols, even patrol schedules. I thought he was just being thorough, but he was gathering intelligence for Victor, Scarlett finished. She felt a chill run down her spine as the conspiracy revealed itself. Damon, you need to call Elias. If Marcus is working with an outside pack, your loyal people need to know before tomorrow night. Damon was already dialing. Elias, I need you to listen carefully, he said when his second-in-command answered. I have reason to believe Marcus is working with Victor Frostbane. Don't react. Don't do anything to tip him off, but I need you to quietly gather our most trusted people and meet me at the safe house. Scarlett could hear Elias's surprised cursing through the phone. How sure are you about this? Elias asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Sure enough to bet my life on it. Damon replied. How quickly can you get here without Marcus noticing? Give me 2 hours. I'll make some excuse about checking patrol routes. After Damon hung up, Scarlett continued studying the information they compiled. There's something else, she said, pointing to a detail in one of the reports. Look at this incident from 3 months ago in the Rose City. Victor's people were testing response times to border incursions. But the timing is weird. It happened the same day Marcus was supposedly visiting your grandmother in the Northern Territories. Damon examined the dates, his expression growing darker. He lied about that trip. Said he was paying respects to family, but he was meeting with Victor. Planning this whole thing, Scarlett said softly. They spent the next 2 hours going through every piece of information they had, building a timeline of Marcus's betrayal that stretched back nearly a year. Every suspicious question, every convenient absence, every time he'd argued for more aggressive tactics, it all took on new meaning in light of his alliance with Victor. When Elias arrived with Aurora and Titan, the atmosphere in the small safe house became charged with barely contained fury. Aurora was exactly as her name suggested, petite, graceful, and carrying an energy that seemed to light up the room. She moved like a dancer or a martial artist, each gesture controlled and purposeful. Titan, by contrast, was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall with shoulders that seemed too wide for doorways. But his eyes were gentle, and when he greeted Scarlett, his voice was surprisingly soft. Marcus has been feeding information to Victor for months, Damon said without preamble, showing them the evidence he and Scarlett had compiled. The challenge tomorrow isn't just about pack leadership. It's the opening move in a coordinated takeover. Aurora whistled low. That sneaky little traitor. I knew something was off when he started asking about our communication protocols. How many people are we dealing with? Titan asked, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. Victor typically travels with a core group of 20 fighters, plus whatever local support he can recruit, Damon replied. Add Marcus's faction within our own pack, and we're potentially outnumbered 2-1. So we're outmanned, outgunned, and facing a coordinated attack from 2 directions, Elias summarized. Fantastic. Scarlett had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up. What if we use that against them? Everyone turned to look at her. I mean, they're expecting you to show up for a traditional challenge, right? She stood up, moving to where Damon had spread out a map of the Whispering Grounds, the traditional challenge site. One-on-one combat, lots of ceremony, very predictable. But Victor doesn't play by traditional rules when it suits him, does he? No, Damon said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. He uses overwhelming force, psychological intimidation, and surprise attacks. Exactly. Scarlett leaned over the map, her mind working through possibilities. So, why should you play fair when he won't? You show up for the challenge as expected, but you have people positioned to neutralize Victor's fighters before the formal combat begins. Turn his own surprise tactics against him. Aurora was nodding, a predatory smile spreading across her face. It could work. If we can take out Victor's support before the challenge officially begins, it becomes a fair fight instead of an execution. Marcus won't expect us to know about the alliance, Titan added. He'll be positioned with Victor's people, thinking he's safe. We'd need perfect timing, Elias said, studying the map with tactical precision. And a lot of things would have to go right simultaneously. As opposed to walking into a trap and hoping for the best, Scarlett countered. At least this way you're controlling some of the variables. Damon looked around at his assembled pack members, then at Scarlett. This human woman who'd accidentally crashed into his life and somehow became essential to his survival. All right, he said. Let's plan an ambush. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, mapping positions, coordinating timing, and identifying loyal pack members who could be trusted with their counterattack plans. Scarlett found herself pulled into the strategic planning despite having absolutely no experience with supernatural combat tactics. But she understood logistics, understood coordinating multiple moving parts, understood how to anticipate problems before they derailed an entire operation. Skills she developed running a small business translated surprisingly well to planning a werewolf coup counteroffensive. As sunset approached and the safe house filled with the energy of controlled anticipation, Scarlett caught Damon watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. "You're remarkable," he said simply. "You know that." "I'm making it up as I go along," Scarlett admitted. "But thank you." Outside, the moon began to rise, not quite full yet, but close enough that Scarlett could feel the tension in every werewolf in the room. Their movements became more fluid, more predatory. Their eyes reflected light in ways that reminded her these weren't just people. They were something more, something other, something that straddled the line between human and wild. Tomorrow night will be the full moon. Tomorrow night, everything will change. But for now, at this moment, they had a plan. They had allies. They had hope. And Scarlett, who'd started this week worried about losing her coffee shop, was somehow at the center of a supernatural conspiracy that would determine the fate of the entire Emerald Coast. Her grandmother would either be horrified or incredibly proud. Possibly both. Chapter 4. Moonrise Conspiracy. The night before the full moon carried a weight that Scarlett could feel in her bones, even though she was human and supposedly immune to the lunar pull that affected her supernatural companions. She watched from the safe house window as the moon rose, almost full, swollen with promise and threat. Inside the apartment, the werewolves moved with increasing restlessness. Aurora paced like a caged panther. Titan kept cracking his knuckles in a repetitive rhythm that suggested a nervous energy seeking outlet. Even Elias, who'd maintained an almost supernatural calm through the planning sessions, kept checking and rechecking his weapons with compulsive precision. Damon stood apart from the others, his back to the wall, eyes closed. But Scarlett could see the tension in every line of his body, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the slight tremor that ran through him every few minutes. "Is he okay?" she whispered to Aurora, who'd paused her pacing nearby. "The wolf is rising," Aurora explained quietly. "Tomorrow night it'll take full control during the transformation, but tonight it's pushing at the boundaries, testing his restraint." She watched Damon with obvious concern. He's one of the strongest alphas I've known in terms of control, but even he struggles the night before the full moon. What happens if he loses control? He won't. Aurora's voice was certain. But it costs him. Every month, maintaining that control costs him more than most people realize. Scarlett moved toward Damon, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Are you doing okay?" Damon's eyes opened, and for just a moment they were golden. Not brown with gold flecks, but solid gold, glowing in the dim light. Then he blinked, and they were normal again, though the effort it took was visible in the tight lines around his mouth. "Full moon brings out the wolf," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "It wants to hunt, to run, to challenge everything in its territory. Tomorrow night during the transformation, I can let it go. Tonight, I have to keep it caged." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He managed a weak smile. "But necessary. Can't have me going full wolf in a safe house in a residential neighborhood. Tends to upset the neighbors." Despite the tension, Scarlett found herself smiling. "I appreciate your consideration for neighborhood relations." Their moment was interrupted by Elias's phone ringing. He answered, listened for a moment, then his expression went dark. "We have a problem," he announced to the room. "That was one of our scouts. Victor's pack is already in the city. They're not waiting for the challenge. They're positioning forces around the Whispering Grounds tonight." "How many?" Damon asked, his voice sharp with command despite the strain of controlling his wolf. "At least 30, possibly more. They're being careful, but our people spotted them moving into position around the challenge site." Aurora stopped pacing. "That's not protocol. Challengers arrive at moonrise, not before. Victor's planning something. He's planning to make sure I don't survive the challenge," Damon said flatly. "This isn't about leadership anymore. It's about elimination." Scarlett felt ice settle in her stomach. "Can you call it off?" "Refuse the challenge. If I don't show, I forfeit by default," Damon explained. "Marcus becomes alpha. Victor's pack moves in as allies to help with the transition, and the Emerald Coast falls under northern control. He looked around at his assembled people. Everything we've built, the alliances, the partnerships with human communities, the progress toward coexistence, it all disappears. Then we need more people, Titan rumbled. Can we call in allies? Other packs who might support us. Damon's phone rang before he could answer. The caller ID showed a name that made him pause. Seraphine Nitros. That's interesting timing, he muttered, answering the call and putting it on speaker. Seraphine. A woman's voice filled the room, smooth, cultured, carrying the weight of authority and centuries of experience. Damon, darling. I hear you're having some difficulties with your pack. And here I thought you had everything under control. News travels fast, Damon said carefully. When it involves Victor Frostbane planning to expand his territory at the expense of progressive pack leadership, yes, news travels very fast indeed. There was a pause, and Scarlett could almost hear the smile in Seraphine's voice. I also hear you're not alone. Who's the woman, Damon? She sounds reasonable, which is more than I can say for most of your associates. Scarlett leaned toward the phone. I'm Scarlett. I accidentally kidnapped Damon 2 days ago, and now I'm apparently involved in werewolf politics. It's been very educational. Seraphine's laughter was rich and genuine. Oh, I like her already, Damon. Where did you find this one? It's complicated, Damon said, shooting Scarlett a look that suggested they'd discuss her tendency to introduce herself as a kidnapper later. Seraphine, what do you know about Victor's expansion plans? The Alpha's tone became serious. More than I'd like. He's been testing boundaries all along the coast for months. The Rose City has had several encounters with his scouts. Nothing overtly hostile yet, but enough to know he's planning something significant. Papers rustled in the background. I'm sending you everything we have on his operation. Numbers, known associates, tactical preferences. Everything. What's his weakness? Scarlett asked, earning a surprised look from everyone in the room. Seraphine was quiet for a moment. Direct question. I appreciate that. Victor is old school, which makes him predictable in some ways. He believes in brute force over strategy, intimidation over negotiation. He also has an ego problem. He can't resist showing off his strength. How does that help us? Damon asked. If you can make him overconfident, get him to reveal his hand early, you might be able to turn his own aggression against him, Seraphine suggested. But Damon, you need to understand something. If Victor takes the Emerald Coast, the Rose City will be next on his list. This isn't just about your pack anymore. It's about whether the Western Territories maintain independence or fall under Northern dominance. Are you offering an alliance? Damon's voice was cautious, hopeful. I'm offering practical support, Seraphine clarified. I can't send my people into your territory for a pack challenge. That would violate neutrality laws and give Victor grounds to claim foreign interference. But I can provide intelligence, resources, and a very fast extraction if things go badly. After Seraphine hung up with promises to send detailed files within the hour, the atmosphere in the safe house had shifted. They weren't alone in this fight. They had allies, intelligence, and most importantly, they knew Victor's weakness. He wants a show of force, Aurora said, studying the maps they'd spread across the small dining table. He wants witnesses to see him crush you publicly. Then we give him witnesses, Scarlett said slowly, an idea forming. But not the kind he's expecting. Everyone turned to look at her. What if we broadcast it? Live stream the entire challenge. She pulled out her laptop, fingers already moving across the keyboard. If Victor's going to violate traditional challenge protocols, let's make sure every pack in the region sees exactly what kind of alpha he really is. Damon stared at her like she'd just suggested solving everything with interpretive dance. Werewolf challenges aren't typically public events, Scarlett. There are secrecy laws, agreements with human authorities, which Victor is already violating by bringing 30 fighters to what's supposed to be a one-on-one challenge, Scarlett interrupted. She turned her laptop around to show them. Look, I can set up multiple camera angles, stream to private channels that only supernatural community members can access. If Victor's going to cheat, we document it. We make it impossible for him to claim he was following tradition. Elias was nodding slowly. It could work. Most of the West Coast pack leaders follow Seraphine's social media accounts. If we broadcast Victor violating challenge protocols, it destroys his credibility permanently. And if we position our people with cameras instead of just weapons, we can document everything while maintaining a defensive posture, Aurora added, warming to the idea. We're not starting a fight. We're just recording what happens. It's brilliant, Titan said, his deep voice carrying approval. Use modern technology to combat ancient treachery. Damon looked at Scarlett with an expression that mixed admiration and disbelief. You want to live stream a werewolf pack challenge to social media. To private, secured social media that only supernatural authorities can access, Scarlett corrected. But yes, essentially. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to prove it was never a fair fight to begin with. They spent the rest of the evening coordinating the technical aspects of Scarlett's plan. She set up multiple streaming accounts, created secure access codes, and reached out through Seraphine's network to ensure the right people would be watching when the challenge began. Aurora and Titan coordinated with loyal pack members, positioning them as witnesses, with cameras rather than fighters with weapons. Elias worked on mapping Victor's forces, trying to identify weak points in their positions. And Damon fought his own internal battle, maintaining control over the wolf that wanted to emerge early, wanted to hunt down Marcus and Victor immediately rather than waiting for formal challenge protocols. Around midnight, Scarlett found him on the small balcony, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles had gone white. You should be sleeping, he said without turning around. Tomorrow's going to be dangerous. So is tonight, apparently. Scarlett leaned against the railing beside him, careful to maintain some distance. How are you holding up? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Damon finally looked at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were more gold than brown, his features sharper somehow more defined. The wolf knows something's wrong. It knows we're going into danger, that the pack is threatened. It wants to protect our territory, our people. He paused. It wants to protect you. Scarlett's breath caught. Me? You're part of the pack now, whether you realize it or not. You've been accepted into the den, shared food, helped plan our defense. In wolf terms, that makes you family. His voice dropped lower. And the wolf protects the family with everything it has. I'm not packed, Scarlett said softly. I'm just a human who got caught up in your world. You're more than that. Damon turned to face her fully, the moonlight catching the gold in his eyes. You've adapted to impossible situations, contributed strategies that might save us all, and you've done it without flinching. That's a pack, Scarlett. That's family. Before Scarlett could respond, Aurora appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but Seraphine's files just came through. You need to see this. They returned inside to find everyone gathered around Elias's laptop. The files Seraphine had sent were comprehensive, detailed intelligence on Victor's pack structure, tactical assessments, and most damningly, intercepted communications that proved the conspiracy between Victor and Marcus stretched back almost a year. They've been planning this since last spring, Elias said, scrolling through messages. Every move is carefully calculated to weaken Damon's position while strengthening their own. Look at this. Aurora pointed to a specific exchange. Victor promised Marcus the Emerald Coast Pack leadership in exchange for intelligence and inside access. They were planning to split the Western territories between them. Was planning, Titan corrected. Past tense. Because now we know, and we have evidence. Scarlett was studying communication timestamps. These messages coincide with every major pack incident over the past year. Every challenge to Damon's authority, every random conflict with other packs, it was all orchestrated. Marcus has been undermining me systematically, Damon said, his voice flat with controlled rage. Using family connections to gather intelligence, then feeding it to Victor to use against us. There's more. Seraphine's voice came through a new video call that Elias had opened. Her face appeared on screen, an elegant woman who looked to be in her 40s, but whose eyes suggested centuries of experience. My contacts in the Northern Territories report that Victor has been telling other alphas you're planning to eliminate pack hierarchies entirely, that you want to dissolve the traditional structures. That's a lie, Damon said immediately. I know it is. But Victor's been using it to justify his expansion as protecting traditional pack values. He's positioned himself as the defender of werewolf culture against dangerous modernization. So, he's not just attacking us, he's been running a propaganda campaign, Aurora said with disgust. Exactly. Which is why documenting his protocol violations tomorrow is so important. Words can be twisted, but actions caught on camera don't lie. As dawn approached, they finalized their plans. Scarlett had 6 different camera angles set up, all streaming to secured channels with emergency backup recordings. Aurora had positioned loyal pack members as witnesses, each with specific instructions to document rather than engage unless absolutely necessary. Elias had coordinated with Seraphine's people to ensure maximum visibility among West Coast supernatural authorities. Everything was ready. Everything except Damon, who was growing increasingly tense as the sun rose and the day of the full moon began. You should rest, Scarlett told him, noting the exhaustion in his face. You'll need your strength tonight. Can't rest, Damon said, his voice strained. The wolf won't let me. It knows what's coming. Scarlett made a decision. Come with me. She led him to the smaller bedroom, the one she'd claimed as hers in the safe house. It was barely larger than a closet, but it had a door that closed and a window that let in the morning light. Lie down, she instructed, pointing to the bed. Scarlett. That wasn't a request, Alpha. She used his title deliberately and saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. You need rest, and you won't get it out there with everyone's nervous energy feeding into yours. So lie down, and I'll stay here until you sleep. You'll stay? Something vulnerable crossed his face. I'll stay, she promised. Damon lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed, his body rigid with tension. Scarlett sat in the small chair by the window, pulling out her phone to review the streaming setup for the 100th time. Tell me something, Damon said after a few minutes of silence. Something normal. Something from before all this. Scarlett thought for a moment. My grandmother used to make this terrible lavender tea that tasted like drinking perfume. But she insisted it was good for sleep and stress. So every night she'd make me a cup, and we'd sit on her porch, and she'd tell me stories about her childhood. What kind of stories? Stories about being an immigrant, about learning a new language and building a life in a strange country. Stories about finding beauty in small things. A perfect cup of coffee, a kind word from a stranger, the way rain made the city smell clean. Scarlett smiled at the memory. She said magic wasn't about supernatural powers. It was about noticing the extraordinary in the ordinary. She sounds wise. She was. She'd have liked you, I think. I disapproved of the crime lord thing, definitely, but she always said you could tell a person's character by how they treated people who couldn't offer them anything in return. And how do I treat people who can't offer me anything? Damon asked, his eyes closed now, his voice growing drowsy. You offered to save my coffee shop before you knew if I'd help you, Scarlett said softly. You protected me from danger I didn't understand. You gave me a choice when you could have just manipulated me into doing what you wanted. She paused. My grandmother would have said those are the actions of a good man trying to be better. I'm not a good man, Scarlett. Maybe not by some definitions. But you're a good alpha. And right now, that's what matters. She continued talking about her grandmother's garden, about learning to make the perfect espresso, about the regular customers at Crimson Brew and their quirks and kindnesses. Her voice became a gentle rhythm, and gradually she felt the tension leave Damon's body as exhaustion finally claimed him. When his breathing deepened into sleep, Scarlett allowed herself to really look at him. In sleep, the dangerous alpha disappeared, revealing someone younger, more vulnerable. The weight he carried became visible in the lines around his eyes, the tension that didn't fully leave even in unconsciousness. She found herself wanting to protect him, this werewolf crime lord who'd crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. It was probably the stupidest impulse she'd ever had, but there it was. Aurora appeared in the doorway, looked at sleeping Damon, then at Scarlett, and smiled knowingly. He trusts you, she whispered. He doesn't sleep around people he doesn't trust completely. I'm just staying until he rests, Scarlett whispered back. Keep telling yourself that, Aurora replied, her smile widening before she quietly closed the door. Scarlett stayed in that chair for 3 hours while Damon slept, reviewing plans and trying not to think about what Aurora's knowing smile meant. Trying not to acknowledge the warmth in her chest when she looked at him, the fierce protectiveness that made no logical sense. She was a human coffee shop owner. He was a werewolf alpha. They came from different worlds, faced different dangers, lived by different rules. But somehow, in the space of 3 days, those worlds had collided and merged in ways that felt increasingly permanent. When Damon finally woke, the sun was high and the full moon was only hours away. "Thank you," he said simply, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "I needed that." "You're welcome. Now go eat something, because if you're going to fight tonight, you need to be at full strength." "Yes, ma'am," he said with a slight smile that made her heart do uncomfortable things. The final hours before moonrise passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons were checked, positions were confirmed, contingency plans were reviewed. Scarlett triple-checked her streaming setup, making sure every backup system was in place. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like blood and fire, the group gathered one final time in the safe house. "Whatever happens tonight," Damon said, looking at each of his people in turn, "I want you to know it's been an honor to lead this pack. You've challenged me, supported me, and helped build something worth fighting for." His eyes found Scarlett's. "All of you. Save the sentimental speeches for after we win," Elias said gruffly, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. "We've got a challenge to survive and a conspiracy to expose." They left the safe house as the moon began to rise, still not quite full, but close enough that every werewolf in the group moved with increasing predatory grace. Scarlett rode with Damon and Elias, her equipment packed carefully in bags designed to look like she was just a documentary filmmaker capturing urban wildlife. The lie was thin, but it would serve if they encountered human authorities. The Whispering Grounds looked different at night. The natural amphitheater that seemed peaceful and beautiful during the day transformed into something ancient and powerful under the rising moon. Trees surrounded the clearing like silent witnesses, their branches creating shadows that seemed to move with purpose. And in the center of the clearing, surrounded by far too many wolves for a traditional challenge, stood Marcus and Victor. It was time. The game was about to begin. Chapter 5: Blood and Moonlight. The Whispering Grounds lived up to their name as Scarlett set up her equipment at the edge of the clearing. The wind moved through the ancient trees with a sound like distant voices, and the almost full moon cast everything in silver and shadow that seemed to shift and breathe. Victor Frostbane stood in the center of the clearing like a conqueror surveying claimed territory. He was massive, even larger than Damon, with the kind of raw physical presence that made people step back instinctively. His blonde hair was pulled back in a warrior's knot, and his eyes were already more wolf than human, gleaming amber in the moonlight. Beside him stood Marcus, and seeing the brothers side by side made the family resemblance painfully obvious. Same dark hair, same sharp features, same powerful build. But where Damon carried his authority with controlled precision, Marcus radiated barely contained aggression. He looked like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. Surrounding them were at least 40 wolves, far more than should be present for a traditional challenge. Some were already in partial transformation, their bodies caught between human and wolf, a grotesque display of dominance that violated every protocol. Scarlett's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her cameras, making sure each angle captured the clearing properly. Her laptop showed 6 different feeds, all streaming live to the secured channel Seraphine had set up. In the chat windows, she could see names appearing, pack leaders from up and down the coast, all tuning in to watch. "They're not even trying to hide the numbers," Aurora whispered beside her, positioned as one of the documentary crew. "Victor wants everyone to see his strength." "Then let's make sure they see everything," Scarlett replied, starting the recordings. Damon walked into the clearing with Elias at his side. He moved with controlled grace, each step deliberate, his posture radiating authority despite being outnumbered 4-1. He changed into simple black clothing that would accommodate transformation. No expensive suit tonight, just practical combat gear. But it was his eyes that captured Scarlett's attention. They were fully gold now, glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with the moon. The wolf was at the surface, barely contained, and the power rolling off him made the air itself feel charged. "Brother," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the clearing with cruel satisfaction. "So good of you to accept my challenge. I was worried you'd run like the coward you've become." "I'm here," Damon replied, his voice steady. "Though I notice you've brought quite an audience for what's supposed to be a private matter." Victor stepped forward, his accent thick with northern inflection. "The Silvercrest Pack's weakness has become everyone's concern. Your soft leadership threatens traditional pack structures across the entire Western territories. I am here as witness and, if necessary, as enforcer of proper werewolf law." "Enforcer?" Damon's voice carried an edge of contempt. "Is that what we're calling invasion forces now?" The live stream chat exploded with comments. Pack leaders were noting the violation, questioning Victor's presence, demanding explanations. Scarlett's plan was already working. Every word, every movement was being documented and judged by supernatural authorities across the region. "Damon Silvercrest," Marcus said with formal gravity, though his eyes gleamed with anticipation, "I challenge your leadership of the Silvercrest Pack under traditional werewolf law. Do you accept this challenge?" "I accept," Damon replied. His voice rang clear in the night air. "Though I note that traditional challenge law requires single combat, not the small army you've assembled. The Northern Pack is here as neutral observers," Victor said smoothly, ensuring fair play and proper adherence to ancient customs. "Neutral observers don't typically position themselves in attack formations," Damon observed, gesturing to where Victor's wolves had arranged themselves around the clearing's perimeter. "They also don't bring weapons to what's supposed to be a natural combat challenge." Scarlett zoomed one of her cameras, capturing the firearms and silver blades clearly visible among Victor's forces. The chat went wild. Silver weapons at a traditional challenge was beyond breach of protocol. It was an admission of intent to kill regardless of combat outcome. "You always were too concerned with details," Marcus sneered. "Father would be ashamed of what you've become. A wolf who plays human politics, who weakens the pack with talk of cooperation and alliance. Tonight, I restore our family's honor." "Our father," Damon said quietly, his words carrying despite their softness, led through fear and brutality. "He made enemies of potential allies and left us isolated and vulnerable. I chose a different path because I believed we could be strong without being cruel. But you never understood that, did you, Marcus? You only understood Father's way, dominate or be destroyed. Father's way kept us alive." Marcus snarled. "Your way has made us weak. Look at you, you need a human woman to fight your battles, to devise your strategies. It's pathetic." Damon's eyes flicked to where Scarlett stood with her cameras, and something warm passed through his expression before the alpha mask returned. "That human woman has more strategic intelligence than you've demonstrated in your entire life. But then, you were always better at following orders than thinking for yourself." Marcus's control snapped. He began to transform, not waiting for the formal beginning of the challenge, not following any protocol. His body twisted and grew, bones cracking and reshaping, for erupting across skin that split and reformed. Within seconds, where Marcus had stood now crouched a massive brown wolf with white patches, lips pulled back to reveal fangs designed to tear and kill. "So much for traditional challenge rules," Elias muttered, his hand moving toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. But Victor held up a hand, stopping his forces from engaging. "Your brother grows impatient," he said to Damon with false sympathy. "Perhaps you should begin? Unless you're having second thoughts?" Damon was already transforming. His shift was different from Marcus's, more controlled, more fluid. Where Marcus's transformation had been violent and painful-looking, Damon seemed almost graceful. His body flowed from one form to another, human features melting into lupin perfection. When the transformation was completed, a massive black wolf with silver markings stood where Damon had been. He was larger than Marcus, his fur gleaming like midnight water, his eyes still that burnished gold that seemed to hold human intelligence and wolf instinct in perfect balance. For a moment, the two brothers faced each other across the clearing. Pack members from both sides held their breath, waiting to see if this would truly be a fair fight or if Victor would spring his trap early. Then Marcus lunged. The impact when they collided was tremendous, sending both wolves tumbling across the grass. Teeth snapped at throats, claws raked at flanks, and the sound of their combat was primal and terrifying, snarls and growls that spoke to something ancient in Scarlett's human hindbrain that screamed at her to run. But she held her position, keeping her cameras steady, documenting everything. Damon was the superior fighter. That became clear within the first minute. He moved with precision, turning Marcus's aggression against him, using his brother's rage to create openings. When Marcus lunged wildly, Damon sidestepped and scored deep cuts along his brother's flank. When Marcus tried to use his weight advantage, Damon used his momentum to flip him entirely. This should have been over quickly. Would have been if Victor had been playing fair. But Victor wasn't playing fair. At some unseen signal, 3 of Victor's wolves broke from the perimeter and rushed into the combat. Not to separate the fighters or enforce rules, but to attack Damon directly. So much for traditional rules, Aurora shouted, and the carefully maintained facade of a legitimate challenge shattered entirely. Suddenly the clearing was full of werewolves in various stages of transformation. Victor's forces surged forward, abandoning any pretense of being neutral observers. Marcus's faction within the Silvercrest pack revealed themselves, joining the assault on their own alpha. What had been planned as a challenge became a massacre in the making. Damon fought with devastating efficiency, taking on multiple opponents at once. But even an alpha had limits, and he was facing overwhelming numbers designed to kill rather than dominate.
Now!
Elias shouted, and the Silvercrest pack's counterattack launched. Loyal pack members who'd been positioned as witnesses dropped their cameras and shifted, entering the fray to even the odds. Aurora moved like liquid lightning, her smaller wolf form darting between larger opponents to strike at vulnerable points. Titan's transformation was earthquake loud, his massive gray wolf form wading into combat like a living battering ram. But Victor had anticipated resistance. He'd brought enough forces to overwhelm even with Damon's loyalists fighting back. Scarlett kept filming, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. The chat was chaos, pack leaders across the region calling for intervention, declaring the challenge void, demanding Victor withdraw. But words couldn't stop what was happening in the clearing. Then, cutting through the sounds of battle, came a new voice. Enough! The word carried supernatural weight, and every werewolf in the clearing, even those mid-combat, faltered and turned toward the source. Seraphine Nitros stood at the edge of the Whispering Grounds, flanked by at least 20 wolves bearing the Rose City pack markings. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from the Vancouver Island Pack, the Northern California Coalition, even a delegation from the Cascade Mountain Territories. The cavalry had arrived. Victor Frostbane. Seraphine's voice rang with authority that came from centuries of leadership. You stand accused of violating fundamental laws of pack challenge protocols. How do you answer? Victor, still in human form, tried to maintain his dominance. This is a legitimate expansion of territory based on the Silvercrest pack's demonstrated weakness. Expansion based on lies and treachery, Seraphine interrupted. She gestured to where Scarlett's cameras were still recording. We've watched everything, Victor. The excessive forces, the planned ambush, the coordination with a traitor within the challenged pack. This isn't a challenge to protocol, it's an invasion. Other pack leaders stepped forward, adding their voices to the condemnation. The Vancouver Island Alpha, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter storms. The Northern California representative, a young alpha whose pack had repelled Victor's scouts the previous summer. Even members of Victor's own pack began backing away, sensing the tide turning against their leader. You have no authority here, Victor snarled, but his voice had lost its confidence. These are internal Northern Pack matters. The moment you brought your forces into Emerald Coast territory, it stopped being internal. Seraphine replied coldly. The moment you conspired to overthrow a sitting alpha through deception and violence, you violated laws that govern all packs. The moment you tried to reshape Western territories to suit your ambitions, you made it everyone's business. Marcus, back in human form and bleeding from multiple wounds, tried to speak. My brother's weakness. Your brother's weakness, Seraphine cut him off, consisted of building alliances, fostering cooperation, and creating sustainable pack structures. The fact that you see these things as flaws rather than strengths tells us everything we need to know about your fitness for leadership. An emergency council was convened right there in the Whispering Grounds, with the live stream serving as evidence. Pack leaders who were watching remotely joined via video conference, their faces appearing on phones and tablets held by witnesses. The proceedings were swift and brutal in their efficiency. Evidence was presented, the intercepted communications between Victor and Marcus, the timeline of systematic betrayal, the protocol violations caught on camera. Witnesses testified, including several of Victor's own pack members who'd grown uncomfortable with his increasingly aggressive expansionism. Victor tried to defend himself, arguing that Damon's progressive leadership threatened traditional pack values, that his actions were necessary to preserve werewolf culture. But when asked to explain the silver weapons, the excessive forces, the coordinated ambush with an inside traitor, he had no answers that didn't condemn him further. The verdict came as the moon reached its apex, full and bright and merciless in its illumination of truth. Victor Frostbane and his co-conspirators were banished from the Pacific territories permanently. Any pack that harbored them would face sanctions from the entire Western Alliance. His pack would be dissolved, with members given the choice of joining other packs or striking out as lone wolves. Marcus faced a harsher judgment. Betraying one's own pack, working with outside forces against your alpha. These were crimes that traditionally carried only one sentence: death. But Damon, exhausted and wounded but still alpha, made a different choice. Exile, he said, his voice rough from transformation but carrying clear authority. Permanent exile with monitoring. Marcus will leave the Emerald Coast and not return. He'll be marked as an oathbreaker, which every pack will know and respect. If he violates exile, then traditional punishment applies. Marcus stared at his brother with an expression that mixed fury and confusion.
Why?
I tried to kill you. I betrayed everything. Just execute me and be done with it. Because I'm not our father, Damon replied quietly. And because somewhere beneath the ambition and the anger, you're still my brother. I'm giving you a chance to be something else, somewhere else. What you do with that chance is up to you. The council accepted Damon's judgment. Marcus was escorted from the grounds by neutral pack members, his face a mask of emotions Scarlett couldn't fully read. Victor and his remaining loyalists followed, stripped of authority and reputation. As the other packs began to disperse, offering congratulations and promises of continued alliance, Scarlett finally stopped recording. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely operate the equipment. Aurora appeared beside her, back in human form and wrapped in a blanket someone had provided. You did it, she said softly. Your plan worked. We documented everything, and it changed everything. I just filmed it, Scarlett said, her voice unsteady. You all fought. You all risked your lives. You gave us a weapon that didn't require bloodshed, Aurora corrected.
Truth.
Evidence. The power of witnesses across an entire region. That's worth more than claws and teeth. Damon approached, also back in human form, moving stiffly from injuries sustained during the brief but brutal combat. Someone had given him clothes, though they didn't fit properly, hanging loose on his frame. You're hurt, Scarlett said, noting the deep scratches across his chest and arms, the way he favored his left side. I'm alive, Damon replied. Thanks to you. Thanks to everyone here. He looked around at the assembled allies, at the clearing that had almost become a killing ground, at the moon that now seemed to shine with less threatening light. We changed something tonight. Proved that the old ways aren't the only ways. Elias approached with a phone. Seraphine wants to talk to you both. The Rose City Alpha's face appeared on screen, her expression satisfied. Well done, all of you. You've not only saved your pack, Damon, you've set a precedent. Other progressive alphas are already reaching out, wanting to know how to implement similar transparency measures. Scarlett gets the credit for that, Damon said, pulling her closer, so she appeared in the video frame. Seraphine studied Scarlett with those ancient, knowing eyes. A human woman who revolutionized pack politics with cameras and live streaming. The bards will sing of this for generations.
She paused.
How would you feel about consulting on a larger scale, helping establish protocols for other territories? I just wanted to save my coffee shop, Scarlett said, overwhelmed by the events of the past few hours. Now you're asking me to help reshape supernatural governance. Sometimes the people who change the world are the ones who didn't set out to do it, Seraphine replied. They just did what needed doing and changed everything in the process. Think about it. After the call ended, after the various packs had departed and cleanup crews arrived to deal with the aftermath of the challenge, Scarlett and Damon found themselves standing at the edge of the Whispering Grounds, watching the sun begin to rise. So, Scarlett said eventually, that happened. That happened, Damon agreed. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Scarlett, I know the past few days have been insane. You've been thrown into a world you didn't know existed, faced dangers you never should have had to face, and changed your entire life in ways you never agreed to. Are you about to give me the you should walk away now speech? Scarlett interrupted. Because I'll save you the trouble. I'm not going anywhere. Why not? Damon asked softly. You've got your coffee shop saved, you've got money and resources, you could go back to your normal life. Why stay involved in this? Scarlett thought about the question while watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Why was she staying? The practical answer was that she'd made commitments, that people were counting on her, that walking away now would leave things unfinished. But the real answer was simpler and more complicated at once. Because this matters, she said finally. What you're building, a world where different people can coexist, where strength doesn't require cruelty, where change is possible, that matters. And maybe I can help. Maybe a human perspective in a supernatural world is exactly what's needed to build bridges that shouldn't exist but do anyway. She turned to face him fully. Also, someone needs to make sure you eat properly and don't work yourself to death trying to be a perfect alpha. Might as well be me. Damon's smile was warm and genuine, the first truly relaxed expression she'd seen on his face since the night they met. I think I'm in serious trouble. Why's that? Because I'm falling for the woman who accidentally kidnapped me, he admitted. And I have no idea how that's supposed to work. Scarlett's breath caught. Well, she said, her voice not quite steady. I guess we'll figure it out as we go. That seems to be our thing, making it up as we go along, and somehow making it work. Our thing, Damon repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. As the sun rose fully over the Emerald Coast, they stood together at the edge of the Whispering Grounds, a werewolf alpha and a human coffee shop owner, brought together by chaos and choosing to stay together by something that felt increasingly like fate. There would be challenges ahead. Political fallout, conspiracy remnants, the work of building something new from something old. But for this moment, in the golden light of morning after a night that could have ended in disaster, they had victory, they had hope, and they had each other. Chapter 6. Building Bridges. The aftermath of the challenge brought a deluge of attention that Scarlett had never anticipated. Within 24 hours, her live stream had been viewed over 1,000 times by supernatural community members across North America. Pack leaders were calling it a watershed moment. The night transparency defeated treachery. The night modern solutions proved more powerful than ancient violence. Scarlett found herself thrust into the role of unofficial consultant on supernatural human relations, fielding calls and messages from alphas who wanted to know how to implement similar oversight measures in their territories. It was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. Another call from the Cascade Mountain Pack, Aurora announced, appearing in the doorway of what had become Scarlett's makeshift office in Damon's penthouse. They'd relocated from the safe house 2 days after the challenge, Once it was clear that Victor's remaining sympathizers had scattered. They want to know about equipment requirements for live streaming pack meetings. Tell them I'll send a detailed guide by tomorrow, Scarlett said, rubbing her temples. Her laptop screen showed 3 different video conferences in progress, each with pack representatives asking technical questions about documentation protocols. You need to eat, Aurora said, not moving from the doorway. You've been working for 6 hours straight. I'm fine. That's what Damon says too, and he's just as bad at taking care of himself as you are. Aurora crossed her arms. Which is why I'm under orders from Elias to make sure you both actually consume food at regular intervals. Scarlett saved her work and closed her laptop with a sigh. When did you become the pack mom? Someone has to be, and Titan is too soft-hearted to enforce anything. Aurora led her to the penthouse's expansive kitchen, where Damon was already seated at the massive granite island, looking at his own laptop with the kind of intense focus that suggested he'd also been working too hard. The penthouse was everything the safe house hadn't been, sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Emerald Coast. Everything was designer-selected and professionally arranged, beautiful but somehow sterile. It felt more like a showroom than a home. Working lunch, Aurora declared, setting plates in front of both of them. And before either of you argues, this is non-negotiable. Damon looked up from his screen and caught Scarlett's eye. His expression said clearly that they were both being managed, and they both knew better than to argue with Aurora when she used that tone. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the kind of comfortable quiet that had developed between them over the past few days. Since the challenge, they'd been working closely on the political aftermath, coordinating with allied packs, establishing new protocols, dealing with the power vacuum left by Victor's banishment. But they hadn't talked about what Damon had said at the Whispering Grounds. About falling for her. About figuring out how this could work. There hadn't been time, with everything else demanding attention. Or maybe they were both avoiding the conversation because neither knew how to navigate it. I've been thinking, Damon said eventually, setting down his fork, about what happens next. For both of us. Scarlett's heart rate picked up. What about it? You can't keep running my pack's public relations from a laptop in my living room, he said. If this is going to be sustainable, if you're going to help multiple packs implement these changes, you need proper infrastructure. Office space, equipment, maybe staff. I'm not exactly qualified to run a supernatural consulting firm, Scarlett pointed out. I'm a coffee shop owner who accidentally became famous for live streaming a werewolf fight. You're someone who sees connections others miss, who solves problems creatively, and who has the unique perspective of being human in a supernatural world. Damon leaned forward, his expression intense. That's exactly what the supernatural community needs right now, someone who can bridge both worlds. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we formalize what you're already doing. Create an actual organization. Part consulting firm, part community center, part neutral ground where different supernatural groups can meet safely. He pulled up something on his laptop and turned it to show her. I've been working on preliminary plans. The document showed detailed proposals for what he was calling the Haven Network, a chain of locations across the Western Territories that would serve as meeting spaces, conflict resolution centers, and points of contact between supernatural and human communities. This is ambitious, Scarlett said, scrolling through the plans. This is really ambitious. It's necessary, Damon replied. What happened with Victor proved that isolation and secrecy breed corruption. But we need controlled transparency, spaces where different groups can interact safely, with protocols that protect everyone involved. And you want Crimson Brew to be the flagship location, Scarlett said, recognizing her coffee shop's name in the documents. If you're willing. It's already functioned as neutral territory without anyone realizing it. We'd just be making that official, expanding it, and creating a model other locations can follow. Scarlett set down her own fork, her mind racing through implications. This would change everything. The coffee shop, my life, the entire nature of what I do. I know I'm asking a lot, Damon interrupted gently. And I know I have no right to ask you to rebuild your life around supernatural politics. If you want to walk away, to go back to just running your coffee shop without all this additional responsibility, I'll understand. That's not what I'm saying, Scarlett clarified. I'm saying yes, but I need you to understand that I have conditions. Rules. A smile tugged at Damon's lips, that small, warm expression she'd come to recognize as genuine pleasure. You and your rules. What are they? First, if I'm going to do this, I do it my way. No interference from pack politics, no pressure to favor one group over another. The Haven Network has to be truly neutral, or it won't work. Agreed. Second, I keep ownership of Crimson Brew. The coffee shop is mine, even if it becomes part of something larger. My grandmother's legacy doesn't get absorbed into some supernatural corporate structure. Absolutely agreed. Third, Scarlett took a breath. We figure out what's happening between us separately from work. Because mixing a romantic relationship with a business partnership is complicated enough without adding werewolf pack dynamics to it. Damon's expression softened. You want to figure out what's happening between us, don't you? More than I probably should, he admitted. But you're right. We need to be careful about how we navigate this. For both our sakes. Aurora, who'd been pretending not to listen while cleaning the kitchen, made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. When they both looked at her, she held up her hands innocently. Don't mind me. Just enjoying watching two intelligent people dance around the obvious. Aurora, Damon said with a warning in his voice.
What?
You're clearly crazy about each other. Everyone can see it, and you're both acting like it's some complicated puzzle to solve. She dried her hands and turned to face them fully. Here's some free advice from someone who's watched pack dynamics for 3 decades. Stop overthinking it. You're compatible. You respect each other. You make each other better. The rest is just details. That's extremely helpful, Scarlett said dryly. Thank you for reducing complex interpersonal relationships to just details. You're welcome. Aurora grinned. Now, if you're done with lunch, Elias wants to go over security protocols for the first official Haven Network location. Apparently, creating neutral supernatural territory comes with insurance complications. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Crimson Brew underwent renovations, expanding the space, adding private meeting rooms, installing security systems that could handle supernatural clientele while remaining unobtrusive to human customers. Scarlett hired additional staff, carefully screening for people who could handle the truth about their more unusual patrons. Damon funded everything, but true to their agreement, he kept ownership with Scarlett and let her make all operational decisions. It was a delicate balance, maintaining their separate spheres while working toward the same goal. They saw each other constantly, morning meetings over coffee, afternoon planning sessions, evening debriefs about the day's progress. But they were careful to keep things professional, to maintain boundaries even as those boundaries became increasingly difficult to define. This is ridiculous, Titan said one afternoon, watching Damon and Scarlett conduct another meeting while very obviously not acknowledging the tension between them. Just kiss her already. It's complicated, Damon replied, not looking up from the construction plans they were reviewing. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated. Titan leaned against the wall, his massive frame somehow looking relaxed despite his size. She's human, you're werewolf, yes, that adds challenges. You're alpha, she's becoming a community leader, yes, that creates potential conflicts of interest. But you're also two people who care about each other and are actively choosing not to act on it for reasons that make less sense every day. Titan. No, let me finish. The enforcer's voice was gentle but firm. I've watched you lead this pack for 5 years, Damon. I've seen you make hard decisions, face impossible odds, and carry weight that would break most people. But I've never seen you as happy as you've been these past few weeks working with Scarlett. Don't sacrifice that happiness because you're afraid of complications. Damon was quiet for a long moment. What if being with me puts her in more danger? What if other alphas see her as leverage against me? Then you protect her, same as you protect any pack member. Better, even, because she's... Titan paused, searching for words. She's your mate, Damon. Whether you've acknowledged it officially or not, that's what she is. The pack can feel it, other werewolves can sense it. The only ones who don't seem to know are you and her. Mate. The word felt heavy with implication. Mate bonds were rare, precious, the kind of connection that transcended simple attraction or affection. They were destiny, fate, soul-deep recognition that some wolves searched their entire lives to find. You didn't know? Titan looked genuinely surprised. I assumed you were keeping it quiet deliberately. How would I know? Damon asked, his mind racing through every interaction with Scarlett, every moment when he'd felt that pull toward her that seemed beyond explanation. You'd know, Titan said simply. The wolf would recognize its match. The human side might rationalize it as attraction or compatibility, but the wolf would know. That night, Damon found himself unable to sleep, Titan's words echoing through his mind. He stood at the penthouse windows, looking out at the city lights and thinking about mate bonds, about destiny, about whether what he felt for Scarlett was simply attraction amplified by circumstances or something more fundamental. Can't sleep either? He turned to find Scarlett in the doorway, wrapped in one of his shirts that she'd borrowed after spilling coffee on her own clothes earlier. It hung to mid-thigh on her, and something about seeing her in his clothing made his wolf side rumble with satisfaction. Too much on my mind, he said. She joined him at the window, and they stood side by side, watching the city breathe below them. Want to talk about it? Titan said something today that I can't stop thinking about. About. Damon hesitated, then decided honesty was better than evasion. About us. About what we are to each other. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. And what did Titans say to each other? He suggested, we might be mates. In the werewolf sense, soul-bonded, fate-matched, all the mystical connection that implies. That sounds intense. It is. Mate bonds are rare, supposedly unmistakable once you recognize them. They're the foundation of pack stability, the strongest connection two wolves can have. But I'm not a wolf, Scarlett pointed out. No, Damon agreed. Which makes it even more unusual. Cross-species mate bonds are possible, but uncommon. And they come with complications, different lifespans, different vulnerabilities, questions about pack acceptance. Scarlett turned to face him fully. Are you asking me if I think we're mates? Or are you trying to warn me that we might be? I don't know, Damon admitted. I just know that when I'm with you, everything makes more sense. The chaos settles, the weight feels lighter. You challenge me, support me, make me want to be better than I am. Is that a mate bond or just compatibility? Does it matter? Scarlett asked. Whether it's a mystical destiny or just two people who work well together, does the label change anything about what we feel? It might change expectations, responsibilities. The pack would treat you differently if they knew you were my mate rather than just someone I'm involved with. Are we involved? Scarlett's voice was soft but direct. Because we've been very careful not to define what this is. Very careful not to cross certain lines. Damon reached out, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that belied his strength. I'm trying to give you choices, Scarlett. Trying not to overwhelm you with supernatural politics and ancient traditions and expectations that you never signed up for. What if I want to be overwhelmed? She leaned into his touch. What if I'm tired of being careful and professional and pretending that I don't feel something every time you walk into a room? Then we stop being careful, Damon said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that made her shiver. But you need to understand what that means. If we do this, if we acknowledge what's between us, it becomes real in ways that affect more than just us. The pack will know, other alphas will know. You'll be seen as mine, and I'll be seen as yours, with all the protection and danger that entails. I understand, Scarlett said. And I'm choosing this anyway. Choosing you. Choosing us. When Damon kissed her, it felt like something clicking into place, a piece of a puzzle finally finding its position. His lips were gentle despite the intensity she could feel thrumming through him, the wolf recognizing its mate and wanting to claim, to bond, to never let go. But the human side remained in control, keeping the kiss tender rather than possessive, a promise rather than a demand. When they broke apart, both breathing harder than the kiss alone warranted, Scarlett smiled. So, about those complications you mentioned. We'll figure them out, Damon said, resting his forehead against hers.
Together.
Together, Scarlett agreed. I like the sound of that. They stood at the window as the city lights slowly gave way to dawn, two souls from different worlds choosing to bridge the gap between them. There would be challenges ahead, pack politics, supernatural threats, the fundamental differences between human and werewolf. But for now, at this moment, they had each other. And that was enough. Chapter 7. Shadows and Revelations. Going public with their relationship changed things in ways both expected and surprising. The Silvercrest pack welcomed the news with what could only be described as relieved enthusiasm. Apparently, Scarlett and Damon had been the worst-kept secret in pack history, and everyone was grateful they'd finally stopped pretending there was nothing between them. About time, Elias said when Damon officially announced it at the next pack gathering. Watching you two dance around each other was painful. But not everyone in the supernatural community was pleased. 3 weeks after the Whispering Grounds challenge, Scarlett received her first death threat. It arrived as an email to the Haven Network's public contact address, anonymous, untraceable, but specific enough to be taken seriously. The message detailed her daily routine with unsettling accuracy, listed places she frequented, and made it clear that some faction viewed her relationship with Damon as an unacceptable breach of pack traditions. "We need to increase your security," Damon said immediately when she showed him the email. His expression was carefully controlled, but Scarlett could see the fury beneath. "Starting today, you don't go anywhere without pack protection." "I'm not living in a bubble," Scarlett protested. "If I let threats dictate my life, they win. If you get hurt because I didn't take threats seriously, I lose everything that matters." Damon's voice was quiet but intense. "Please, Scarlett. Let me protect you." They compromised. Scarlett would have discreet security, pack members who could blend into her daily routine without making her feel imprisoned. Aurora became a regular presence at Crimson Brew, ostensibly helping with operations, but actually serving as close protection. Titan took to, coincidentally, being wherever Scarlett needed to go, his massive frame serving as both deterrent and shield. The threats continued sporadically over the next few weeks, always anonymous, always untraceable. Most were standard intimidation, warnings to stay away from werewolf affairs, suggestions that humans didn't belong in pack politics. But a few were specific enough to suggest inside knowledge. "Someone's feeding them information," Elias said during a security briefing in Damon's penthouse. "These threats reference things that aren't public knowledge. Haven Network planning documents, private conversations, internal pack schedules." "You think we have another traitor?" Aurora asked, her expression dark. "I think we never fully rooted out Marcus's network," Elias replied. "When we exiled the obvious conspirators, we probably missed some who kept their heads down, waited for things to calm, and are now making moves." Damon's jaw tightened. "Start with anyone who had access to Marcus before his exile. Cross-reference their movements with the timing of the threats. Someone's coordinating this, and I want to know who." The investigation took another turn when Scarlett received an unexpected visitor at Crimson Brew. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the lull between lunch rush and evening studiers. Scarlett was behind the counter, experimenting with a new lavender honey latte recipe, when a woman walked in who made every werewolf in the shop tense immediately. She was stunning, the kind of beauty that seemed almost supernatural in its perfection. Dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes were an unusual violet shade that suggested either contacts or something more unusual. She moved with predatory grace, and power radiated from her like heat from a fire. "Scarlett Thorne," the woman said, her voice carrying an accent Scarlett couldn't quite place. "I've been wanting to meet you." Aurora had materialized beside Scarlett so quickly it was almost teleportation. "Identify yourself," she demanded, her hand positioned where Scarlett knew she kept a concealed weapon. "Peace, little wolf." The woman held up her hands in a gesture of non-aggression. "I'm not here to cause trouble. My name is Seraphine Nitros. We spoke via video during the challenge." Scarlett recognized the name immediately. "The Rose City Alpha. You helped coordinate the Allied response against Victor." "The same." Seraphine smiled, and it was both warm and slightly predatory. I was in town for a regional council meeting and thought I'd stop by the famous Crimson Brew. See the place that's become the model for supernatural human cooperation. You could have called ahead, Aurora said, still tense. Showing up unannounced tends to make people nervous. Where's the fun in that? Seraphine moved to the counter, examining the menu with apparent interest. Besides, I wanted to see how your operation handles unexpected supernatural visitors. Impressive response time, by the way. She nodded toward Aurora. Your protection detail is well trained. Scarlett decided to treat this like any other customer, despite her racing heart. What can I get you? Surprise me, Seraphine said. Make me whatever you think suits me.
It was a test, Scarlett realized.
Everything about this visit was a test. How she handled pressure, how she read people, whether she could function under scrutiny from supernatural authority. She made a decision based on instinct and observation. Seraphine carried herself with centuries of confidence, spoke with layers of meaning, and had eyes that suggested she'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. She needed something complex, something with depth, something that rewarded attention. Scarlett crafted an espresso with dark chocolate, cardamom, and a hint of orange zest, bold, exotic, with unexpected elements that created a sophisticated whole. Seraphine took a sip, and her expression transformed into genuine pleasure. Oh, that's excellent. Complex, surprising, and perfectly balanced. She took another sip. You read people well, Scarlett Thorne. That's a valuable skill in any world, but especially in ours. Thank you, I think. Scarlett busied herself cleaning the espresso machine, trying to appear calmer than she felt. Walk with me, Seraphine said, finishing her drink. There are things we should discuss privately. Aurora started to object, but Seraphine waved her off. The girl will be perfectly safe with me. You have my word as Alpha, and you know what that's worth. They walked through the neighborhood surrounding Crimson Brew, Seraphine moving with the confidence of someone who feared nothing. For several minutes, she said nothing, just observed the area with apparent interest. You've built something impressive here, she finally said. A true neutral ground where different species can coexist peacefully. It's exactly what the supernatural community needs. But, Scarlett prompted, sensing there was more coming. But success attracts attention, and not all of it is positive. Seraphine stopped at a small park, settling on a bench and gesturing for Scarlett to join her. Those threats you've been receiving, they're not random. They're part of a coordinated campaign to undermine what you and Damon are building. You know about the threats? I know about everything that affects regional supernatural politics, Seraphine said with a slight smile. That's my job as one of the senior alphas. And I'm telling you this because you need to understand the larger picture. She pulled out her phone and showed Scarlett a series of messages, similar threats sent to other progressive pack leaders, attacks on supernatural human cooperation initiatives, a pattern of resistance to the changes sweeping through werewolf communities. There's a faction that views what happened at the Whispering Grounds as an aberration that needs to be corrected, Seraphine explained. They see your live streaming, your documentation, your involvement in pack affairs as dangerous precedents. They want to restore what they consider proper order. By threatening me? By trying to scare me away from Damon? By removing what they see as corrupting influences. Seraphine's expression was serious. You need to understand, Scarlett, some of these people are genuinely dangerous. They're not just sending emails. They're planning actual operations to disrupt Haven network locations, target humans involved in supernatural affairs, and send a message that certain boundaries shouldn't be crossed. Scarlett felt ice settle in her stomach. How bad is it? Bad enough that I'm here personally to warn you. Bad enough that several alphas are coordinating increased security across all Haven network locations. Bad enough that we've intercepted chatter about a major action plan for the winter solstice, the darkest night of the year, traditionally significant in supernatural communities. That's less than 2 months away.
Exactly.
Which means we need to be prepared, need to have countermeasures in place, and need to make sure that when they make their move, we're ready. Seraphine stood, smoothing her clothes. I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but to prepare you. What you and Damon are building matters, Scarlett. It matters enough that people want to destroy it. That means it's working. They walked back toward Crimson Brew in silence, Scarlett processing everything she'd learned. When they reached the shop's entrance, Seraphine paused. One more thing, she said. Be careful who you trust. Not everyone who appears supportive actually is. Marcus had a network, and we didn't catch all of them. Some are still embedded, still feeding information to people who want to see you fail. Why are you helping us? Scarlett asked directly. What do you get out of supporting Damon and the Haven Network? Seraphine's smile was approving. Direct questions. I like that. The answer is simple. I'm 347 years old, Scarlett. I've seen pack wars, supernatural persecution, centuries of conflict that accomplished nothing but death and suffering. I'm tired of it. What you and Damon are building, genuine coexistence, structural change, a future where supernatural and human communities don't have to hide from each other, that's worth protecting, worth fighting for. She turned to leave, then paused. Also, I have a daughter, Isadora. She's young, idealistic, and believes in the kind of world you're creating. I'd like her to inherit something better than what I did. After Seraphine left, Scarlett found herself standing in her coffee shop, surrounded by the normal sounds of espresso machines and quiet conversation, processing the fact that she'd just received a personal warning from a centuries-old alpha about coordinated threats against everything she'd helped build. She called Damon immediately. We have a problem, she said when he answered. Actually, we have multiple problems, and they're all coming to a head at the winter solstice. The emergency meeting that night included Damon's entire inner circle plus representatives from allied packs. Seraphine joined via video conference, her presence lending weight to the threat assessment. We're looking at coordinated attacks across multiple Haven network locations, Elias explained, displaying intelligence gathered from various sources. The faction behind this calls themselves the Preservation Coalition, traditionalists who view supernatural human integration as corrupting influence. How many people are we talking about? Damon asked. At least 50 confirmed members across 5 pack territories, possibly more we haven't identified. Elias pulled up profiles. They're well-organized, well-funded, and have support from some older, more conservative supernatural communities. They're targeting Haven network locations specifically because of their symbolic importance, Seraphine added from the video screen. Destroy physical spaces, destroy the idea that coexistence is possible. It's psychological warfare as much as physical attack. Aurora was studying the tactical assessments with a warrior's eye. We can't defend all locations simultaneously. We don't have enough people, and spreading ourselves thin makes us vulnerable everywhere. Then we don't defend all locations, Scarlett said, an idea forming. We choose one, the most important one, and we make it a trap. Everyone turned to look at her. Explain, Damon said. They expect us to spread ourselves thin, trying to protect everything. What if instead we deliberately make one location look vulnerable while actually fortifying it? We let them come, document everything like we did at the Whispering Grounds, and expose the Preservation Coalition publicly. Use their own attack against them. Titan rumbled approvingly. Turn it into evidence of their extremism. It's risky, Elias said. If we miscalculate, people could get hurt. Real people, not just strategic positions. If we don't do something proactive, people will definitely get hurt across multiple locations, Scarlett countered. At least this way we control the variables, choose the battlefield, and document everything for the supernatural community to see. Damon was quiet, his mind clearly working through implications. Which location do we use as bait? Scarlett took a breath. Crimson Brew. It's the original, the symbolic heart of the Haven network. If they're going to make a statement, they'll want to destroy what started it all. Absolutely not, Damon said immediately. I'm not using you as bait. It's not using me as bait. It's using my coffee shop, which is different. Scarlett met his eyes steadily. This is my fight too, Damon. I'm not just the human girlfriend who needs protecting. I'm part of this movement, and I have the right to defend what I helped build. She's right, Aurora said quietly. And she's the only human among us who truly understands what we're fighting for. That makes her the perfect person to be visible during this. The argument went on for hours, with Damon firmly opposed to putting Scarlett in any danger, and everyone else gradually coming around to the strategic soundness of her plan. Finally, Seraphine intervened. "Damon," she said from the screen, her voice carrying authority, "I understand your protective instincts. But Scarlett isn't asking for permission. She's telling you what she's going to do. You can either work with her to make it as safe as possible, or you can watch her do it anyway without proper support. Choose wisely." Damon looked at Scarlett, frustration and fear warring in his expression. "If anything happens to you, then you'll have Aurora, Titan, Elias, and half a dozen allied packs providing security," Scarlett interrupted. "Plus every camera angle documented, every moment recorded, every action by the Preservation Coalition exposed for the entire supernatural community to judge." "I hate this plan," Damon said. "I know, but it's still the best option we have." They spent the next several weeks preparing. Crimson Brew was quietly fortified, reinforced doors, upgraded security systems, strategic positions for pack members to remain hidden but ready. Other Haven network locations received actual security upgrades as well, just in case the Preservation Coalition decided to attack multiple targets despite the obvious bait. Scarlett continued her normal routine, appearing vulnerable while actually being protected by the most comprehensive security network the Silvercrest pack could provide. Every person who entered Crimson Brew was scrutinized, every delivery examined, every potential threat assessed and cataloged. But the anticipated attack didn't come in an obvious form. Instead, 2 weeks before the winter solstice, Scarlett received a personal visit from someone unexpected, Marcus. He appeared at Crimson Brew during the lunch rush, walking through the door with the careful movements of someone expecting to be attacked at any moment. He looked different from the angry, ambitious wolf who challenged Damon, thinner, worn, his eyes carrying a weight that suggested exile had been harder than expected. Aurora was beside Scarlett instantly, but Marcus held up his hands. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to warn you." "Warn us about what?" Scarlett asked, noting how every werewolf in the shop had subtly positioned themselves between Marcus and the human customers. "The winter solstice attack. I know about it because some of my former contacts reached out, thinking I'd want revenge against Damon." Marcus's voice was tired. "They're planning something worse than you expect. It's not just an attack on the Haven network. It's a coordinated strike designed to eliminate progressive pack leadership across the entire Western territories." "Why are you telling us this?" Scarlett asked. "Why help Damon after everything?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Because exile gives you a lot of time to think. Time to realize that my father's way, the way I thought was right, just leads to endless conflict and suffering. Time to understand what Damon's building actually matters." He looked around the coffee shop, taking in the mix of human and supernatural customers coexisting peacefully. "This is what I should have supported from the beginning. I was too proud and too stupid to see it." Damon arrived within minutes of being called, his expression carefully neutral as he faced his brother for the first time since the exile. "Talk," he said simply. And Marcus talked, revealing details about the Preservation Coalition's plans that confirmed and expanded on everything they'd learned. Simultaneous attacks on 3 major Haven network locations. Coordinated assassination attempts on progressive alphas. A propaganda campaign designed to paint the supernatural human cooperation movement as dangerous corruption. "They're using the winter solstice because of its symbolic significance," Marcus explained. "The longest night, the time of darkness before light returns. They want to send a message that the old ways are reasserting themselves." How do we know this isn't disinformation?" Elias asked. How do we know you're not still working with them?" "You don't," Marcus admitted. "You have to decide whether to trust me, knowing I've already betrayed that trust once. But I'm telling you, if you don't take this seriously, people are going to die. Good people. People who are just trying to build something better." After Marcus left, escorted by pack members who would verify his information while keeping him under surveillance, Damon stood at the window of Crimson Brew, watching his brother disappear into the city. "Do you believe him?" Scarlett asked softly. "I want to," Damon said. He's my brother. Despite everything, part of me still wants to believe he can change, can become something better than what our father made him. But trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully repair. We'll verify everything he told us, prepare for the worst, and hope that maybe, just maybe, he's genuinely trying to make amends. The information Marcus provided proved accurate when cross-referenced with other intelligence. The Preservation Coalition was indeed planning a coordinated strike, with Crimson Brew as one of 3 primary targets. They had less than 2 weeks to prepare for the longest night of the year, and everything they'd built hung in the balance. Chapter 8. The Longest Night. The winter solstice arrived with unseasonable cold, the kind that sank into bones and made the whole city feel brittle and fragile. Scarlett watched the sun set early from Crimson Brew's windows, knowing that in a few hours, the longest night of the year would bring darkness and violence in equal measure. The coffee shop looked normal, customers working on laptops, a book club meeting in the corner, the familiar hiss and gurgle of espresso machines. But Scarlett could see the differences if she knew where to look. The customers, positioned near every entrance and exit, who never quite focused on their drinks. The renovations that had reinforced walls and installed bulletproof glass. The cameras are hidden in decorative elements, streaming everything to multiple secure locations. Last chance to change your mind, Damon said quietly, appearing beside her behind the counter. He'd been saying variations of this all day, his protective instincts warring with his understanding that this was necessary. Not changing my mind, Scarlett replied, wiping down the espresso machine with mechanical precision. Her hands were steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. How's the perimeter? Aurora has the north entrance. Titan's covering south. Elias is coordinating from the command center upstairs with sight lines on the entire block. Damon's voice was professional, but his eyes betrayed his concern. Allied packs are in position at the other target locations. Seraphine's people are ready to move at the first sign of trouble. And Marcus, still maintaining he wants to help. He's positioned with Elias, monitoring communications from the Preservation Coalition. Damon's expression was conflicted. I still don't know if I can trust him. Trust but verify, Scarlett said, echoing the phrase Elias had used during planning. We use his information while keeping him under surveillance. If he's genuine, he helps us. If he's not, we're prepared. The last regular customers left as closing time approached. Scarlett went through her normal shutdown routine, cleaning machines, wiping tables, counting the register. Everything had to appear normal and had to look like just another night closing up the shop. But as she locked the front door and turned the sign to closed, she knew the real night was just beginning. Positions, Damon said quietly into his radio. Throughout the building, pack members melted into shadows and prepared positions. The coffee shop that had been warm and welcoming moments before transformed into a fortress, ready for siege. Scarlett moved to the command center, her small office on the second floor, now equipped with monitors showing every camera angle. Elias sat at the main console, his fingers moving across keyboards with practiced efficiency. Marcus stood to one side, his posture tense, monitoring a laptop that tracked Preservation Coalition communications. They're moving, Marcus said suddenly. Multiple teams converging on all 3 locations. ETA here is 15 minutes. Other locations? Damon asked, his voice tight. Rose City Haven Center reports movement. 8 contacts approaching from the west. Elias read from incoming messages. Northern California location has visual on 6 unknowns. We're confirming the threat status now. Scarlett's heart hammered as she watched the feeds. This was really happening. Despite all the preparation, all the planning, the reality of imminent violence made everything feel suddenly too real. Damon's hand found hers, squeezing gently. We've got this. Trust the plan. I trust you, Scarlett replied. All of you. The first sign of the attack came not from the front, but from above. Rooftop breach. Aurora's voice cracked through the radio. 4 contacts rappelling from the building next door. They're trying to access through the 3rd floor windows. Titan, Aurora. Intercept. Damon ordered. Non-lethal if possible, but protect the position. Through the security feeds, Scarlett watched Aurora and Titan move to counter the rooftop assault. The attackers were well-equipped, military-grade gear, coordinated movements, professional execution. This wasn't a mob of angry traditionalists. This was a trained strike team. Front entrance breach in 3, 2, 1. Elias counted down. The front windows exploded inward, not from bullets, but from some kind of supernatural force that shattered the bulletproof glass like it was paper. 6 figures poured through the opening, moving with inhuman speed and coordination. But the Silvercrest pack was ready. Defenders emerged from concealment, engaging the attackers in close combat that showcased the brutal efficiency of werewolf warfare. Claws met enhanced weapons, supernatural strength collided with tactical training. Scarlett forced herself to keep filming, to document everything even as violence erupted below. The cameras captured every moment, the Preservation Coalition attackers using silver weapons, the defenders fighting to protect neutral territory, the calculated aggression of the assault. Side entrance breach, another voice reported. They're trying to flank us through the kitchen. Team 3, intercept, Damon responded, his alpha authority cutting through the chaos. Remember, we want prisoners, not bodies. We need evidence of coordination. The battle was fierce but controlled. The Silvercrest pack fought with the discipline of defenders rather than the aggression of conquerors, containing rather than destroying, capturing rather than killing. Through it all, Scarlett's cameras recorded everything. Then Marcus's laptop began blaring urgent alerts. "We have a problem," he said, his voice tight. The Rose City location just went dark. All communications cut. Seraphine's face appeared on one of the video screens, her expression grim. "We're under heavy assault. They brought more forces than anticipated, at least 20 attackers, maybe more. We're holding, but barely." Northern California is reporting similar numbers, Elias added, monitoring other feeds. They lied about their strength. This isn't 3 small teams. It's a full-scale coordinated invasion. Damon's face went pale as the implications sank in. They used our own strategy against us. They made us think we were setting the trap, but we walked into theirs. They wanted us to concentrate forces here, while they overwhelmed the other locations. "We need to send reinforcements," Aurora said, appearing in the doorway, blood on her clothes from the rooftop fight. "Seraphine's pack can't hold against those numbers. If we pull people from here, we become vulnerable," Elias countered. "And if we don't, Seraphine's people die and we lose 2 major Haven network locations," Scarlett said. Her mind raced through options. All of them bad. How fast can allied packs mobilize to the other locations? 20 minutes minimum, Damon said. Maybe 30 depending on traffic. Seraphine doesn't have 30 minutes, Marcus said, watching his screen. According to Preservation Coalition communications, they're planning to overwhelm defenses and then torch the building. They want maximum symbolic destruction. Scarlett made a decision. Pull half our forces. Send them to reinforce the other locations. We can hold here with reduced numbers long enough for this to matter. That's too risky, Damon started. Everything about this is risky. Scarlett interrupted. But we can't just protect ourselves and let other people die. That's exactly the kind of selfish traditionalism we're fighting against. Damon looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, and made the call that defined his leadership. Aurora, Titan, take teams to Rose City and Northern California. Move fast, hit hard, and save who you can. He turned to Elias. Redistribute remaining forces to cover gaps here. We hold until either reinforcements arrive or we've beaten back the assault. That's suicide with reduced numbers, Elias said bluntly. That's leadership, Damon corrected. Now move. As half their defensive force mobilized to help allied locations, the Preservation Coalition launched their main assault on Crimson Brew. This wave was different, more coordinated, more brutal, led by someone who clearly understood werewolf combat tactics. They came through multiple entrances simultaneously, using silver weapons and supernatural abilities in combination that suggested extensive training. The reduced defensive force fought valiantly, but the numbers were overwhelmingly against them. Scarlett watched through cameras as her coffee shop, her grandmother's legacy, her life's work, became a battlefield. Tables overturned, equipment destroyed, the walls she'd painted, and the floors she'd refinished bearing the scars of supernatural violence. It hurt to watch, but she kept filming, kept documenting, because that's what would matter after. If there was an after. They're pushing toward the second floor, Marcus said urgently. Toward us. They know we're coordinating from here. Damon moved to block the door, his body already beginning the shift to wolf form. Elias, get Scarlett out. Use the back stairs, get to the safe vehicle. I'm not leaving, Scarlett said firmly. Scarlett. I said I'm not leaving. Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the chaos. This is my shop, my fight, and I'm seeing it through. An explosion rocked the building, something hitting the wall below with enough force to make the entire structure shudder. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several monitors went dark. Structural damage to the south wall, Elias reported, his voice maintaining professional calm even as everything fell apart. The building's integrity is compromised. Then we need to end this now, Damon said. He pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Alpha Silvercrest. I'm invoking emergency alliance protocols. All allied packs converge on Crimson Brew immediately. Authorization, Omega 77. That's the nuclear option, Elias said. That calls every available wolf in the region. I know, but we're out of other options. The battle reached the second floor. Attackers poured up the stairs, and Damon met them in the hallway in full wolf form, a black mass of fury and protective instinct. He fought with the desperation of an alpha defending his mate and his territory, and for a moment, he held the line alone. Then Marcus moved. He shifted, partial transformation that left him capable of using weapons while having supernatural strength, and joined Damon in defending the command center. Brother fought beside brother, and whatever betrayals existed in their past didn't matter in this moment of shared purpose. Scarlett kept filming. Even as violence erupted just beyond her door, even as the building groaned and threatened collapse, she documented everything. The Preservation Coalition using excessive force. The defenders are fighting to protect neutral territory. The coordinated assault on multiple Haven network locations simultaneously. This was evidence. This was proof. This would change everything. Then the door burst open, and a figure emerged from the chaos, a woman with striking features and cold eyes. She moved with authority that suggested leadership, and the way other attackers deferred to her confirmed it. Scarlett Thorne, the woman said, her voice carrying an accent similar to Seraphine's. The human who thinks she can change centuries of tradition with cameras and coffee shops. How quaint. Who are you? Scarlett demanded, keeping her hands on her equipment, still recording. Someone who understands that order requires hierarchy, that strength demands dominance, that humans have no place in supernatural affairs. The woman advanced into the room. I'm here to deliver a message about the consequences of crossing boundaries that should never be crossed. Damon, bloodied from the hallway fight, appeared in the doorway. His wolf form wavered back toward humans, though his eyes remained gold and his teeth were still too sharp for humanity. You're not touching her, he growled. The woman smiled. Predictable. The alpha protects his human mate. It's almost sweet. She gestured, and more attackers poured into the room. But ultimately futile. What happened next occurred in heartbeats that felt like hours. The woman moved toward Scarlett with inhuman speed. Damon intercepted her, and they collided with enough force to crack the floor. Marcus engaged the other attackers, fighting with desperate efficiency. Elias maintained his position at the computers, still coordinating, still trying to hold the defense together. And Scarlett kept filming. She captured the woman, later identified as Helena Ravencroft, leader of the Preservation Coalition, admitting to coordinated attacks. She documented the silver weapons, the excessive force, the intent to destroy rather than challenge fairly. She recorded everything that would prove, beyond any doubt, that this wasn't about tradition versus progress. This was about people willing to kill to maintain power. The tide turned when the emergency alliance arrived. Wolves from a dozen packs poured into the building, responding to Damon's call for help. The Preservation Coalition forces, suddenly outnumbered and facing unified opposition, began to fall back. Helena Ravencroft fought like a demon, but even she couldn't withstand a combined pack assault. When Aurora arrived with reinforcements from the Rose City, Seraphine's location had been successfully defended. The coalition leader finally went down. As dawn broke over the Emerald Coast, the longest night finally ended. Crimson Brew was damaged but standing. The other Haven Network locations had survived their assaults. And most importantly, every moment had been documented, recorded, and transmitted to supernatural authorities across the continent. The Preservation Coalition's coordinated attack had failed spectacularly. And in failing, they'd proven exactly why the Haven Network was necessary. Scarlett stood in her wrecked coffee shop, surrounded by broken furniture and shattered dreams, and felt something unexpected: hope. "We did it," she said to Damon, who stood beside her looking exhausted and bloodied but alive. "We actually did it." "You did it," he corrected, pulling her close despite the grime and blood. "You refused to back down, refused to hide, and documented the truth for everyone to see." Marcus approached hesitantly. "I should go, but I wanted to say, I'm proud of what you built here. Both of you." Damon looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw something that might have been redemption. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere I can be useful. Somewhere I can help build instead of destroy." Marcus managed a sad smile. "Maybe find out who I am when I'm not trying to be a father." As Marcus left, Elias appeared with preliminary damage reports. Structurally, the building's salvageable. Cosmetically, you're looking at major renovations. The good news is that allied packs are already offering assistance and funding for repairs. "The other locations?" Scarlett asked. Rose City sustained damage, but no casualties. Northern California had 2 injuries, but both are expected to recover fully. Considering what could have happened. Elias shook his head. "We got lucky. We got prepared," Damon corrected. "We got united. We proved that cooperation works better than isolation." Over the following days, the supernatural community processed the events of the winter solstice. Scarlett's documentation, hours of footage showing the Preservation Coalition's coordinated assault, their use of excessive force, their intent to destroy rather than challenge, spread through supernatural networks like wildfire. The backlash was swift and comprehensive. Helena Ravencroft and her co-conspirators were arrested by supernatural authorities, facing charges that carried penalties ranging from permanent exile to execution. The Preservation Coalition was formally dissolved, with its members given the choice of renouncing their extremism or facing sanctions from every major pack in North America. And the Haven Network, damaged but undefeated, became a symbol of resilience and progress. 3 weeks after the winter solstice, Crimson Brew reopened. The renovations had transformed the space while maintaining its essential character. The walls bore subtle scars from the battle, deliberately left as reminders of what had been defended. A memorial plaque listed the names of everyone who'd fought to protect neutral ground, supernatural and human names side by side in acknowledgement of shared purpose. Scarlett stood behind her newly installed espresso machine, state-of-the-art equipment donated by Seraphine's Rose City Pack, and made her first post-battle latte. The familiar routine of grinding beans, tamping grounds, pulling the perfect shot felt like coming home. Mrs. Patterson was her first customer, arriving at exactly 8:30 for her lavender latte. The elderly woman took her usual seat by the window and asked no questions about the renovations, content simply to have her routine restored. That, Scarlett thought, was what they'd been fighting for. Not grand political statements or revolutionary change, but the simple right for people to have a place where they felt safe and welcome, where routines could exist, where ordinary moments could be extraordinary simply by being allowed to happen. Damon arrived mid-morning, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in months. "How does it feel?" he asked, accepting the coffee she'd already prepared for him. "Like home," Scarlett replied. "Damaged, reconstructed, better than before, but different too. Like home." Speaking of home, Damon said, pulling out a set of keys, I have something for you. The keys were for a house in the Obsidian District, a beautifully restored Victorian with enough space for both of them to have offices, a proper kitchen for Scarlett's cooking experiments, and a garden where Damon could indulge his werewolf fondness for outdoor spaces. I thought we could make something that's actually ours, he explained. Not my penthouse or your apartment above the shop, but something we built together. If you want that. Scarlett looked at the keys, at Damon, at the coffee shop they defended, and the future they were creating. 6 months ago, she'd been drowning in debt and desperation, one bad day away from losing everything. Now she had a thriving business, a purpose that mattered, and a werewolf alpha who looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. I want that, she said, taking the keys. I want all of it. The house, the future, the complicated life where nothing is ever simple, but everything matters. Good, Damon said, pulling her close. Because you're stuck with me now. The wolf has claimed you. The man loves you, and there's no going back from that. Who said I want to go back? As they stood in Crimson Brew, surrounded by customers and coffee and the ordinary magic of daily life, Scarlett thought about her grandmother's words. Magic isn't about supernatural powers. It's about noticing the extraordinary in the ordinary. She'd found both, the supernatural and the extraordinary, the ordinary and the magical, all mixed together in ways she never could have imagined. And it was perfect. Chapter 9. Forever Under the Moon. 6 months after the winter solstice attack, the Emerald Coast supernatural community gathered to celebrate something unprecedented. The first official treaty between werewolf packs and human civic authorities. The ceremony took place in a newly constructed building that served as both Haven Network headquarters and neutral diplomatic ground, a sprawling complex that combined Scarlett's vision of welcoming public spaces with Damon's understanding of supernatural security needs. Scarlett stood backstage, adjusting her dress for the 3rd time and trying not to hyperventilate. You're going to be fine, Aurora said, appearing beside her with the easy grace that came naturally to werewolves. You've faced down assassination attempts and coordinated attacks. A speech in front of a few hundred people should be easy. A few hundred people, including the mayor, the police chief, representatives from 12 pack territories, 3 vampire covens, and a witch conclave, Scarlett corrected, her voice climbing slightly. No pressure at all. Breathe, Aurora instructed, demonstrating. You've got this. You literally helped rewrite supernatural human relations. This is just talking about what you already did. Through the curtain, Scarlett could hear the crowd gathering, voices blending human and supernatural, conversations crossing boundaries that had seemed impossible to bridge just a year ago. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked, had led to this moment. Damon found her in the wings, looking uncomfortably formal in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her first car. Ready. Absolutely terrified, Scarlett admitted. But yes, ready. He took her hand, squeezing gently. Then let's go change the world. Again. The treaty signing ceremony was everything formal diplomatic occasions should be. Speeches about cooperation, carefully worded agreements that had taken months to negotiate, symbolic gestures that carried weight beyond their surface meaning. But what Scarlett remembered most was the moment when the mayor, a pragmatic woman who'd initially been skeptical of the entire supernatural community, shook hands with Damon and said simply, "Thank you for trusting us with the truth." That handshake, captured by dozens of cameras and broadcast across the region, symbolized something profound. Acknowledgement. Recognition. The beginning of genuine partnership between communities that had hidden from each other for centuries. After the formal proceedings, the celebration moved to the ground floor, a massive open space that Scarlett had designed specifically for events like this. It was Crimson Brew magnified, with multiple coffee bars, comfortable seating areas, and enough room for several hundred people to mingle without feeling crowded. You've built something extraordinary, Seraphine said, appearing beside Scarlett with a glass of wine. The Rose City Alpha had become a regular presence in their lives, serving as advisor, ally, and occasionally as the voice of experience when Scarlett and Damon got too caught up in the details of changing the world. We built it, Scarlett corrected. All of us. Every person who believed cooperation was possible, who fought to defend neutral ground, who took risks to create something better. Gracious as always, Seraphine smiled. But we both know you were the catalyst. The human woman who looked at centuries of tradition and said, "No, we can do better." That kind of courage changes everything. Across the room, Scarlett saw Damon in conversation with the mayor and several pack alphas, his presence commanding respect without demanding dominance. He'd grown into his role as progressive alpha, proving that strength and collaboration weren't mutually exclusive. He's good at this, Seraphine observed, following Scarlett's gaze. Leading without dominating. Commanding without controlling. Your influence, I think. His choice, Scarlett replied. I just showed him there were other options. Don't undersell your impact. Seraphine's expression grew more serious. I've lived 3 centuries, Scarlett. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched societies transform and collapse. What you and Damon are building here, genuine coexistence, structural integration, sustainable cooperation, I've never seen it work before. Not at this scale, not with this level of success. It almost didn't work, Scarlett said, remembering the winter solstice, the violence, how close they'd come to losing everything. But it did. Because when tested, when pushed to breaking points, you chose to defend it together. That's what makes it sustainable, not the absence of conflict, but the commitment to work through conflict without destroying what you've built. The evening continued with speeches, toasts, and the kind of networking that came with bringing together diverse communities. Scarlett found herself in conversations with people she never would have imagined meeting. A vampire entrepreneur interested in opening a Haven network location in the Eastern Territories, a witch scholar researching supernatural human cooperation throughout history, a human city council member wanting to establish similar programs in other cities. But the moment that mattered most came late in the evening, when Mrs. Patterson, Scarlett's most loyal customer, approached Damon at the coffee bar. Young man, she said in the imperious tone of someone who'd taught elementary school for 40 years and brooked no nonsense from anyone, I want you to know that I've been coming to Scarlett's coffee shop for 6 years. Every morning, 8:30 lavender latte. Yes, ma'am, Damon replied, clearly uncertain where this was going. I've watched this neighborhood change, watched businesses come and go, watched young people try to make their mark and usually fail. Mrs. Patterson fixed him with a look that probably made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. But what Scarlett has built, what you've helped her build, that's special. That's important. You take care of her, you hear me? Because if you break that girl's heart, I don't care how many werewolves you have. I'll hunt you down myself. For a moment, Damon just stared at the elderly woman who'd threatened him with absolute sincerity. Then he smiled, genuine, warm, completely disarming. Yes, ma'am, he said. I promise I will. Good. Mrs. Patterson nodded decisively. Now make me a lavender latte. I want to see if you've learned anything. Watching Damon carefully craft a latte under Mrs. Patterson's exacting supervision, Scarlett felt something warm settle in her chest. This was what they'd fought for, not grand political statements or revolutionary manifestos, but the simple reality of people caring about each other across any boundary. Later, as the celebration wound down and cleanup crews began their work, Scarlett and Damon found themselves on the building's rooftop terrace. The emerald coast spread out below them, city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. I have something for you, Damon said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Scarlett's heart jumped. Damon. It's not what you think. Well, not exactly what you think. He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple silver band with a moonstone that caught the light with ethereal glow. It's a promise ring. In werewolf tradition, it symbolizes the intention to mate bond, a pre-engagement, if you will. He took her hand, his expression vulnerable in ways he rarely allowed others to see. Scarlett Thorne, you crashed into my life, literally, and changed everything. You challenged me, supported me, made me want to be better than I thought I could be. You took a world that was broken and helped me build something beautiful from the pieces. I love you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. The man loves you, The wolf has claimed you, and I want to spend whatever time we have building a life together. Not just a business partnership or a political alliance, but real life. Wake up together, argue about whose turn it is to do dishes, grow old together, all of it. But I'm human, Scarlett said softly. I age, you don't. I have maybe 60 years left if I'm lucky. You have centuries. How does that work? I don't know, Damon admitted. I just know that 60 years with you is worth more than centuries without you. We'll figure out the rest as we go. That's what we do, right? Make it up as we go along, and somehow make it work. Scarlett looked at the ring, at Damon, at the city spread out below them. A city where humans and supernatural beings were learning to coexist, where impossible things became possible through choice and effort and stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't change. Yes, she said. To all of it. The ring, the promise, the life together. Yes. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Not the end of their story, but the beginning of a new chapter. One they'd write together, one word and one day at a time. The moon rose over the Emerald Coast, full and bright, and witness to their promise. Somewhere in the city below, their coffee shop stood as testament to what they'd built. Around them, the Haven Network locations represented hope made concrete. And in this moment on this rooftop, two people from different worlds chose to create something new. So, Scarlett said eventually, leaning against Damon's shoulder, what happens now? Now we go home, probably argue about wedding planning for 6 months, definitely have opinions about whether werewolf pack ceremonies should be combined with human traditions, and eventually figure out how to blend both our worlds into something uniquely ours. Sounds complicated. Sounds perfect, Damon corrected. 1 year after their first collision, Scarlett and Damon stood before their combined communities, human and supernatural, traditional and progressive, and made promises that transcended any single tradition. The ceremony took place at the Whispering Grounds, the same clearing where Damon had faced Marcus's challenge and where the live stream had changed pack politics forever. But now, instead of violence, the clearing hosted a celebration. Aurora served as Scarlett's maid of honor, looking elegant in a dress that accommodated rapid transformation if needed, a practical consideration that made Scarlett laugh and cry in equal measure. Elias stood as Damon's best man, his gruff exterior cracking to reveal genuine emotion as he watched his alpha marry the human woman who'd saved them all. Marcus attended from a distance, still in exile, but granted temporary permission to witness his brother's happiness. Titan managed the logistics with the efficiency of someone coordinating a military operation rather than a wedding. And Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row with her lavender latte, prepared to judge the proceedings with the same exacting standards she applied to coffee. Seraphine officiated, her ancient authority lending weight to promises that bridged species and tradition. We gather today to witness a union that symbolizes everything our communities have fought to achieve, she began. Not the erasure of differences, but the celebration of what's possible when we choose love over fear, cooperation over domination, hope over cynicism. The vows were simple but profound. Damon promised to honor Scarlett's humanity while sharing his supernatural world, to protect without smothering, to lead without dominating. Scarlett promised to understand Damon's wolf nature while keeping him grounded in human compassion, to challenge without undermining, to support without enabling. I promise to always make you grilled cheese when the world gets too heavy, Scarlett added, earning laughter from the gathered crowd. I promise to never underestimate the power of good kitchen equipment, Damon replied, which got even more laughter and a satisfied nod from Mrs. Patterson. When they kissed, sealing promises that would bind them across whatever challenges lay ahead, the assembled community, werewolf, human, vampire, which erupted in celebration that transcended any single tradition. The reception that followed was everything their relationship had been, chaotic, joyful, completely unprecedented, and somehow perfectly right. Human guests mingled with werewolves, comparing notes on local restaurants and packed politics. Vampires discussed investment strategies with human entrepreneurs. Witches offered blessing spells alongside traditional wedding toasts. And in the center of it all, Scarlett and Damon danced under the open sky, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and the community they'd built. Any regrets? Damon asked as they moved to music that blended human melodies with supernatural harmonies. None, Scarlett replied. Well, maybe one. I wish my grandmother could have been here to see this. She would have loved you. Disappointed with the crime lord thing, obviously, but loved you anyway. I think she'd be proud of what you've built. What we've all built together. I think so too. As the celebration continued into the night, as the moon rose full and bright over the whispering grounds, Scarlett reflected on everything that had brought them to this moment. One car accident, one impulsive decision to help a stranger, one choice to stand firm instead of running away. All of it had led here, to this impossible, beautiful, complicated life. 2 years after their first collision, the Haven network had expanded to 12 locations across 5 states. Scarlett divided her time between running Crimson Brew and consulting for new locations, helping other communities create their own bridges between human and supernatural worlds. Damon continued leading the Silvercrest pack, but with a governing council that included human advisors, a radical change that other progressive packs were beginning to adopt. The days of single alpha absolute authority were giving way to collaborative leadership models that drew strength from diverse perspectives. Their home in the Obsidian District had become a gathering place for both communities. Pack meetings in the dining room, human friends for dinner parties in the kitchen, quiet evenings on the porch watching the city lights come alive. And sometimes, when the moon was full and Damon needed to run, Scarlett would sit in their garden and wait for him to return, knowing that the wolf would always come back to her, that the man would always choose their life together over the call of wild freedom. You're thinking too much again, Aurora said, appearing with 2 cups of coffee. She'd become Scarlett's closest friend, the sister she'd never had, the bridge between her human life and her supernatural family. Just reflecting, Scarlett replied, accepting the coffee with gratitude. Thinking about how much has changed in 2 years. Everything has changed, Aurora corrected. But also nothing has. You're still the woman who threatened an alpha with a spatula. You're just now the woman who changed supernatural politics forever. I didn't do it alone. None of us did. That's the whole point, isn't it? We're stronger together than we ever could be separately. That evening, Scarlett stood in Crimson Brew's kitchen, expanded now, with equipment that could handle the increased volume and staff trained to serve both human and supernatural clientele, and made grilled cheese. Not for customers, but for her family. Damon, Aurora, Elias, Titan, and a half-dozen pack members who'd become as much her family as anyone connected by blood. She made each sandwich with care, layering cheese and adding personalized touches she'd learned about each person over the months of cooking together. Food is love, she said as she served them, echoing her grandmother's words. And you're all loved. They sat around the expanded table, human and werewolf, traditional and progressive, all the impossible combinations that had become her normal, and shared a meal that represented everything they'd built together. Later, alone with Damon in their home, Scarlett felt contentment settle over her like a warm blanket. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The simpler life before I crashed into you? Damon pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with gentle strength. Not even for a second. My life before you was half-lived, half-sleeping, going through motions without purpose. You woke me up, challenged me, made me want to build something worth protecting. I just made coffee and asked annoying questions. You made magic, he corrected. You took ordinary moments and made them extraordinary. You saw possibilities where others saw only obstacles. You believed things could change, and then made them change through sheer stubborn determination and really good grilled cheese. Scarlett laughed, tilting her head up to kiss him. I love you, Damon Silvercrest. My werewolf, my alpha, my impossible, wonderful husband. I love you, Scarlett Silvercrest, he replied, using her chosen married name. My mate, my partner, my human who changed everything. As they stood together in their home, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd built. Photos on the walls, coffee equipment in the kitchen, books about both human and supernatural history piled on every surface. Scarlett thought about her grandmother's final words to her. "Build something that matters," Rosa had said from her hospital bed, weak but still fierce. "Don't just exist, make a difference. Create spaces where people feel welcome. Love fiercely, fight for what's right, and never settle for a small life." Scarlett had done all of that and more. She built bridges, created community, changed political structures, and found love with someone from another world entirely. Her life was anything but small. And it had all started with one reversed car, one rainy night, one moment of choosing to help instead of running away. 5 years after their first collision, Scarlett stood before a crowd at the first International Supernatural Human Relations Conference, an event that would have been unthinkable before the Haven Network, before live streaming the Whispering Grounds Challenge, before proving that coexistence was possible. 5 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the hundreds of people watching, I was a struggling coffee shop owner who accidentally reversed into the wrong SUV. I had no idea about werewolves, about pack politics, about anything beyond making the perfect latte and keeping my grandmother's legacy alive. Today, I stand before you as proof that ordinary people can create extraordinary change. Not because I was special or qualified or prepared, but because when faced with the impossible, I chose to try anyway. I chose to help a stranger. I chose to stay when running would have been safer. I chose to believe that different worlds could coexist if we were willing to do the work. She looked out at the crowd, humans and werewolves, vampires and witches, scholars and activists, all gathered to discuss how to build sustainable bridges between communities that had hidden from each other for centuries. The Haven Network isn't my creation, it's ours. Every person who chose cooperation over isolation, who risked safety for connection, who believed things could change, and then made them change. That's what created this movement, and that's what will sustain it into the future. So my challenge to all of you is this. Find your impossible thing. Find the boundary you think can't be crossed, the problem you think can't be solved, the change you think can't happen. Because 5 years ago, a struggling human coffee shop owner and a werewolf crime lord proved that impossible things become possible when we choose to make them so. The applause was thunderous, validating, but what mattered most was the conversation that followed, practical discussions about implementation, honest acknowledgement of challenges, genuine commitment to doing the hard work of building something better. This was what Scarlett had fought for. Not grand gestures or perfect solutions, but sustained commitment to incremental improvement. The messy, complicated, beautiful work of creating genuine coexistence. That night, Damon found her on their porch, looking out at the city that had become their shared home. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her. "Thinking about how far we've come. How much has changed. How much still needs to change." She leaned against his shoulder, wondering if what we've built will last. "It'll last," Damon said with certainty. "Not because it's perfect, but because it's necessary. Because once people see that coexistence is possible, they can't unsee it. We've changed expectations, created new templates, proven that different doesn't have to mean divided." "You sound confident." "I am confident. Because I've watched you turn impossible into inevitable over and over again. If anyone can make lasting change, it's the woman who threatened me with kitchen equipment and somehow revolutionized supernatural politics." Scarlett laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "That's going to be on my tombstone, isn't it?" She threatened a werewolf with a spatula. "Among other things," Damon agreed, pulling her closer. "Also, she changed the world. She loved fiercely. She made really excellent coffee. And grilled cheese," Scarlett added. "And grilled cheese," Damon confirmed. As the moon rose over the Emerald Coast, full and bright, and witness to everything they'd built, Scarlett Silvercrest smiled. Her life had become something beyond her wildest imagination, complicated, dangerous, meaningful, filled with love and purpose and the daily work of building something better. It had all started with one collision in the rain. And it would continue as long as they chose. every single day, to keep building bridges instead of walls, to choose hope over fear, to believe that impossible things were simply things that hadn't been done yet. The coffee shop owner and the werewolf alpha, the human woman and the supernatural leader. Two people from different worlds who'd crashed together and decided to create something new. Together, they'd changed everything. And they were just getting started. The end. If this tale of passion, courage, and impossible love has stirred your soul tonight, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story told under the moonlight. Share this with your pack, your friends, your fellow dreamers, your chosen family who believes that love transcends every boundary. Drop a comment and tell me, would you take the risk Scarlett took? Would you crash into destiny and choose to stay? Until next time, Moonlit Souls, remember, sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin with a single moment of chaos, a choice to help instead of running, and the courage to believe that impossible things are simply waiting for someone brave enough to make them real. Keep howling at the moon. Keep believing in love. Keep choosing courage over fear. This is Wolf Heart Tales, reminding you that the best stories are the ones we choose to live.